Welcome to Potter Read. Today's adventure. Harry broke an ancient goblin curse at age 7 and the nation named him Friend of the Forge. If you haven't already, smash that subscribe button and ring the bell so you never miss a story. Now let's begin. Chapter 1. The Cursed Thing. The morning Harry Potter learned the world had a hidden floor under it. He had been awake since 5 because the spider in the cupboard had been building and he liked to watch. He was 7 years old and small for it. He knew he was small because Dudley reminded him daily, and because the school nurse wrote it on a card and frowned. He did not mind being small. Small fit through gaps. Small when unnoticed, and being unnoticed was the closest thing to safety that number 4 Privet Drive had ever offered him. That Saturday the Dursleys were going to London. It was Dudley's idea of a birthday, which meant a toy shop the size of a church and lunch somewhere with thick menus, and there had been a brief, furious argument in the kitchen about what to do with the boy. Mrs. Figg was ill. The neighbor with the motorbike had moved. In the end, Aunt Petunia decided that a child who could not be trusted in the house could at least be made to stand quietly in a corner of a department store where she could keep one eye on him and her handbag in the other. This was how Harry came to be lost in London, which he would later understand was the single most important accident of his life. He had not run. He wanted that on the record privately, where he kept all the things no one would ever ask him about. He had not run. The crowd by the toy shop had simply closed over him like water, and when it opened again the Dursleys were gone, and Harry was standing on a pavement he did not know, in a city that did not know him, with 30 pence and a feeling in his chest he could not name. He was not frightened. Fear was a thing that happened in the cupboard when Vernon's footsteps slowed outside the door. This was different. This was the feeling of a held breath, of a door standing open that had always been locked. He walked because standing still made people look at him. Charing Cross Road went on for a long time. He passed a bookshop and a record shop with a hand-lettered sign and a place that sold nothing but buttons. And then, between a bookshop and the button shop, he passed something his eyes refused to hold. It was a pub, or it had a door and a hanging sign too grimed to read, and a window the color of old tea. People walked past it without slowing, and Harry understood, with the strange, clean certainty that visited him sometimes, that they were walking past it because they could not see it. Their eyes slid off the door the way water slid off the cupboard's painted slats. His did not. He stood in front of the dark little door and felt the thing he would spend the rest of his life trying to explain to people who had no word for it. It was not a sound exactly, though sound was the nearest thing his mind had to compare it to. It was a structure. He could feel the pub the way you can feel a chord struck on a piano in the next room, all the notes at once, and most of them were ordinary, warm, woody, the hum of a kettle and old beer and pipe smoke, but under them ran a single low note that did not belong. A grinding, a wrongness far off and deep, like a toothache felt through a wall. Harry had felt that note before, faintly, in odd places, under a war memorial once, in the dark behind a locked church door, and he had learned to leave such places alone. But the grinding here was louder. It came up through the soles of his shoes. It came from below, from a long way below, and it was hungry. He did not know how he knew it was hungry. He knew it the way you know a dog is about to bite. A man in a long traveling cloak came out of the dark door, and for one moment the inside of the pub showed behind him, candlelight, a low ceiling, faces, and the man held the door, glanced down, and said, "Mind yourself, lad," and Harry, who had learned that the way to go where you were not wanted was to go quickly, and as if you belonged, stepped through the gap before the door could close. Inside it smelled of butter and char and something green and sharp he had no name for. A toothless man behind the bar was polishing a glass and talking to no one Harry could see. Nobody looked at the small boy who crossed the room with his eyes fixed on the back wall, because the boy walked as though an adult had sent him on an errand, and a boy on an errand is the most invisible thing in the world. The grinding note led him to a backyard the size of a cupboard, walled in brick, with a dustbin and a single stunted weed. A dead end. Harry stood among the bins and felt the wrongness pulling at him from below and to the left, the way a smell pulls you toward a kitchen, and he put his hand flat against the brick wall because his body wanted to, and he had stopped arguing with that wanting some time ago. The brick was warm. Under his palm he felt the wall the way he had felt the pub, a structure, a chord, and this one was a question waiting for an answer. 3 bricks up, 2 across. The pattern wanted a touch the way a lock wants a key. He did not decide to do it. His finger found the brick that was singing the loudest, the one that was almost asking, and he pressed it, and a feeling went out of him like a sneeze, a small bright spending he would later learn to call magic, and the wall came apart. It did not fall, it folded. Brick drew back from brick, swinging wide and silent, until where the wall had been there was an archway, and beyond the archway a cobbled street ran crooked between leaning buildings, hung with signs that moved on their own, crowded with people in robes and pointed hats, and over all of it, drowning the cheerful noise the way a foghorn drowns birdsong for Harry, and for Harry alone in all that street, the deep grinding note rang out, hungry and patient and old. It came from the white building at the far end. The one that stood crooked, taller than the rest, with bronze doors and burnished pillars, looking down the length of the street like a thing that had been there before the street and would be there after. Harry walked toward it because the wrongness lived there, and because he had learned long ago that the only way to stop being afraid of a thing was to go and look at it. The alley should have stopped him in his tracks, and for the length of 3 steps it did. There were owls in cages and cauldrons stacked in barrels, and a shop whose window was full of slowly turning brass instruments, and robed people swept past him talking of things he had no frame for: dragonhide gloves, a bad batch of flue powder, the price of newt. A boy his own age pressed his nose to the window of a shop full of broomsticks. A witch in plum robes argued with a man over a crate that hissed. It was the most extraordinary place Harry had ever stood, and another child would have forgotten everything else and simply looked. Harry looked and kept walking, because under the wonder the grinding note went on, and the wonder did not touch it, and Harry had learned long ago that a bright thing in front of you is most dangerous exactly when there is a dark thing underneath it that the brightness is helping you ignore. So he let the alley be wonderful and did not let it stop him, and he walked the length of it toward the crooked white building with the deep wrong note pulling him on, a small ragged boy moving against the cheerful current with his eyes fixed on the one thing in all that street that no one else could feel. The bronze doors stood open, and a creature in scarlet and gold stood beside them, and the creature was not a man. It was shorter than Harry, which no adult had ever been, with long clever fingers and a face all folds and angles and a nose like a blade. Its eyes were black and quick, and they went over Harry once, dismissed him as a lost Muggle child, and returned to the street. Harry knew the look. It was the look that decided he did not matter. He had been receiving it his whole life, and it had taught him that the people who decided he did not matter would say a great many useful things in front of him, because they had stopped seeing him. He went up the white steps. Past the first creature there were silver doors, and words cut into the silver, and Harry, who read everything, read them. Enter, stranger, but take heed of what awaits the sin of greed, for those who take, but do not earn, must pay most dearly in their turn. He read it twice, set it beside all the other warnings adults had ever given him, and went in. The hall beyond was the largest room he had ever stood in, marble and gold, with 100 of the creatures at 100 high desks, weighing coins and writing in long ledgers and saying nothing to the wizards who lined up before them. It was cool and vast, and it should have hummed with all that work, all that metal, all that careful intent, and it did. That was the thing. To Harry the hall rang like a struck bell, like a cathedral full of singing, every coin and scale and quill and ledger clasp humming its own true note, all of them made by hands that had meant something by the making. He had never in his life stood in a place so loud with rightness. It was beautiful. He stood just inside the silver doors and let it wash over him, and for a moment he forgot why he had come. Then he heard the other thing under it. The grinding note lived in the floor. It came up through the marble from somewhere very far down, and where the hall sang, the floor groaned, and the two sounds did not belong to each other at all. The hall had been made by someone, the floor note unmade. He could feel it eating at the edges of the bell song, the way damp eats the edge of a page, slow, patient, certain. It had been eating for a long time. It was nowhere near finished. Harry crossed the marble floor with his head tipped, listening, and stopped in the center of the hall and stood directly over the place where the wrongness was loudest, and looked down at his own shoes as though he could see through them. It was this, a small, ragged Muggle boy standing alone in the middle of the floor, staring at it, frowning, as though the floor had said something to him, that made the goblin at the nearest desk stop writing. Name was Griffook, and he was young as goblins counted years, and ambitious and bored, and he watched the human child over the rim of his desk with the particular attention of someone who has been told 100 times that nothing interesting ever happens at the front counter. The child was not lost in the way lost children were lost. Lost children looked at the doors. This one looked at the floor. This one had its head cocked like a bird that has heard something in the grass. You, Griffook said. The exit is behind you. Harry looked up. He had a thin face and black hair that went where it liked and eyes a startling green, and he did not look at Griffook the way children looked at goblins, which was either with fear or with the particular rudeness of children who had been taught that goblins were not people. He looked at Griffook the way one careful person looks at another who might know something. What's under the floor? Harry said. Griffook's quill stopped. There is nothing under the floor that concerns you, he said. There's something wrong with it, said Harry. He said it plainly, the way you would report a fact, not the way you would tell a secret. Down there, a long way down, he paused, hunting the word, and did not find it, and used the nearest one. It's hungry. It's the same as the thing under the pub, but bigger. It's eating something. He looked back down at the floor. It's been eating it for a long time. Can't you hear it? The hall went on around them, coins clinking, quills scratching. Griffook sat very still. He was young, but he was a goblin, and every goblin from the cradle knew the one thing that was never, ever said aloud where wizards could hear it, the secret the nation had kept behind its teeth for 400 years until the words had nearly rusted shut from disuse. Something is eating the work, a long way down. It has been eating for a long time. Wait here, Griffook said. His voice had changed. Do not move. Do not touch anything. He came down off his stool, which put the top of his head level with Harry's chin, and he looked the boy in the eye for a moment with an expression Harry could not read, and then he went away fast through a door behind the desks, and Harry, who had been told to wait here many times in his life by people who did not come back, waited anyway, because the floor was still singing its hungry song and he wanted to know what it was. The goblin who came back with Griffook was old. Harry had not known goblins could look old. The teller's skin had been smooth and gray-brown. This one's was the color and texture of a riverbed in drought, cracked into 1,000 fine plates, and one of his eyes was filmed over white and blind, and the knuckles of both his hands were burned pale, the scars gone bone-white and shiny, as though he had once held something far too hot for far too long and decided not to let go. He walked with a black iron cane that he did not seem to need. He came across the marble without hurry, and he did not look at Harry's face. He looked at Harry's feet, at the patch of floor Harry stood on, and then he closed his good eye and stood, and Harry understood, with a flush of something he had never felt before in his life, recognition, that the old goblin was listening too. "Tell me what you hear," the old goblin said. His voice was low and dry, like stone moved over stone. He did not open his eye. "There's the loud part," Harry said. Everything in the room, it's like singing, everything that got made." He was choosing words carefully now, because for the first time someone was listening to the answer, and he did not want to waste it. "And then there's the floor, it's underneath, it's not singing, it's the opposite of singing, it's taking the singing apart, slowly, from the inside." He frowned, listening harder. "It's not coming up here, it's down there, but it's getting wider, like a stain." The old goblin opened his good eye. For a long moment he simply looked at the boy, and his face, which had 100 years of stillness in it, did something complicated and quickly hidden. Then he reached into the breast of his coat and took out 3 coins and held them on his scarred palm. "Look at these," he said. "Not with your eyes, tell me about them." Harry looked. 2 of the coins sang the same bright true note as everything in the hall, the note of a thing made on purpose by someone who meant it. The 3rd coin did not sing. It sat in the old goblin's palm like a hole in the music. Harry leaned toward it and felt nothing coming off it at all, no note, no grain, no maker, and worse than nothing, a faint cold tug, as though the dead coin were very slightly trying to pull the song out of the 2 beside it. "That one's dead," Harry said, and pointed at it. "The middle one, it doesn't—" He hunted again, and this time the word came. "It doesn't remember being made, the other 2 remember, they know whose they are, that one." Something made it forget. He looked up. Did the floor thing do that to it? The black iron cane made a small sound against the marble. The old goblin's scarred hand closed slowly over the 3 coins. "What is your name, boy?" he said. "Harry." "Harry what?" He almost did not say it. He had learned that his surname did things to people's faces, even people who had no business knowing it, even teachers. But the old goblin had asked him a real question and waited for a real answer, which no one did, and Harry was 7 and starving for it in a way he had no name for either. "Potter," he said. "Harry Potter." The blind white eye and the black living one both stayed on him, and neither of them changed. The name did nothing to the old goblin's face. It was, Harry thought, the first time in his life a grown-up had heard his name and gone on looking at him exactly as before, as though Harry were the interesting part and Potter merely a fact, and he would remember that for a long time without knowing why. "My name is Gornock," the old goblin said. "I am a warder of the Understone. You have heard a thing today that no wizard of full years and 40 seasons of training has ever heard standing in this hall." He paused. "And no goblin child hears it before its first 100 years, and most never hear it at all. You are how old?" 7. 7, Gornock repeated, and there was something in the dry voice that was almost a laugh and almost the opposite. He turned his head and said something quick and harsh to Griffook in a language that sounded like stones grinding, and Griffook's eyes widened and he began to argue low and fast, and Gornock said one short word that ended it. Griffook bowed stiffly and went. "Where's he going?" Harry asked. "To tell those who must be told that the front counter has this morning become interesting." Gornock turned the iron cane in his scarred hands. "And to be told, no doubt, that I am an old fool who has let a muggle child play on his sympathy. They will be wrong, I have no sympathy, I am too old for it." He fixed Harry with the black eye. "But I am not too old to count, and the thing you have just done cannot be counted, so." He stepped back and gestured with the cane toward the door behind the desks, the one Griffook had gone through, beyond which Harry could feel a stair going down and down into the place where the hungry note was born. "You wish to know what is under the floor. Few have ever been shown, fewer who breathe air and not stone. Will you come and see?" Harry should have said no. Some animal part of him, the part trained by the cupboard, knew that you did not go through strange doors with strange people into the dark under a city. But the old goblin had not lied to him once, and had heard him, and had asked instead of told, and the hungry note was calling, and Harry had spent 7 years learning that the only thing worse than a frightening question was an unanswered one. "Yes," he said. The stair went down for a very long time. It was not a stair at first. It was a cart, a rattling iron thing that ran on rails into a dark that swallowed the lamps, and it went down and down through a stone throat where the walls streamed past too fast to see, and the air grew cold and thick and old. Harry held the iron bar and did not make a sound, and Gornock watched him not make a sound, and something in the old goblin's posture eased by a fraction, as though the not making of sounds had been a test too. The wrongness grew as they descended. The bell song of the upper hall faded and then was gone, and in its place the grinding note swelled until Harry could feel it in his teeth, in the small bones behind his ears, a vast slow hunger turning over somewhere ahead. But under the wrongness behind it, around it, there was something else now, and as the cart slowed and the dark opened out, Harry saw it and forgot for a moment to breathe. The cavern had no end that he could see. It fell away below the railhead into a gulf of warm red light, and out of the gulf rose the city. It was built downward. That was the first thing his mind could not hold, that the towers hung from the dark like icicles, that the streets ran along the undersides of stone shelves, that bridges arced across a darkness lit from below by a glow the color of a banked fire. Goblin work, all of it, into Harry's other sense. It sang, oh, it sang, 100,000 voices of worked stone and forged iron and bound silver, every lintel and rail and door humming the note of the hand that made it, so that the whole vast inverted city rang like a single held chord struck 400 years ago and never allowed to fade. It was the most beautiful thing he had ever felt. He had not known the world had such things in it. He had thought the world was Privet Drive. And through the cord fouling it ran the rot. He could see where it lived now. Far below, at the very root of the hanging city, where the red light was brightest, stood a forge. It was the size of a cathedral, and it was the source of the glow, and the song of the city poured out of it like a river poured from a spring, and so did the wrongness. The two came from the same place. The hungry note and the singing note were tangled together at the root, the rot growing out of the same stone as the glory, and Harry understood without being told that this was the heart of everything here, and that it was sick. The heart forge, Gornuk said. He had been watching Harry's face. Older than the city, older than the bargain that built the White House above. From its fire every true thing of our nation is struck, and into every true thing goes a little of its fire, so that goblin work remembers its maker as a child remembers its mother. That is the whole of what we are. We do not write our history in books, boy, we forge it. Every blade is a name, every ward is an oath, the work remembers. The dry voice did not change, but the scarred hands tightened on the cane. And for 400 years the work has been forgetting. The cart had stopped. They stood on a ledge above the hanging city, and below them the heart forge burned and rotted at once. That coin, Harry said slowly. The dead one, that's what's happening to everything down here. It was not a question. Slowly, Gornuk said, so slowly that a goblin may live and die and never see his own blade dull. But the blade's dull, the wards loosen, the oaths, he stopped. Once in my grandsire's day a vault stood that no thief could pass for 900 years, because the lock remembered its purpose better than any living thing remembers anything. Last winter it opened to a wizard's clumsy spell because the lock had forgotten what it was for. He looked down at the forge. We do not speak of it, not above, not to the wizards who would smell weakness and circle, hardly to ourselves. The rust that hungers, the smiths call it, when they must name it at all. The sundering blight, it is in the root of the forge, and we cannot get it out. We have tried for 4 centuries, the greatest smiths of the nation, the curse breakers of the wizards, hired in secret and sworn to silence and sent down to the root with all their cleverness. The blind white eye caught the red light. They scour it and it grows back. They cut the binding that holds it and it ties itself anew. They counseled us once to let the fire go cold to starve the rot, and we tried, and the rot ate the city's song faster in the dark, for a cold forge remembers nothing at all. He turned to Harry. 400 years, boy, the wisest of 2 peoples, and not one of them could tell me, standing where you stand, the thing you told me standing on the floor of the hall. What did I tell you? Harry asked. He genuinely wanted to know. He had only said what he heard. You told me it was eating something. You told me it was getting wider. You told me it made the coin forget. Gornuk's voice dropped. Every smith I have ever stood beside on this ledge has called it rust, decay, a thing that is happening to the forge, a wound, and so for 400 years we have tried to heal a wound. He shook his head once. You did not call it a wound, you called it hungry, you said it was eating, you said something made the coin forget. The black eye fixed on Harry. A wound does not eat, a wound does not want, only a made thing wants because want is put into it by the one who made it. He let that sit. You have stood on this ledge for the length of a single breath, and you have told me, without knowing it, that the thing in my forge is not a sickness. It is a work. Someone forged it. Someone meant it. Far below, the red fire of the heart forge guttered and steadied, and for just a moment, in the play of the light across the cathedral-sized anvil at its root, Harry saw a face. It was carved into the black stone at the forge's foot, vast and faint and worn, a long, pale, narrow face with a high brow and hollow cheeks and eyes that were only shadows, and it should not have caught his attention at all among the 1,000 carvings of that place. But to his other sense the face rang. Where the rest of the carvings sang the goblin note, deep and stony and true, the pale face sang nothing. It was a hole, like the dead coin, a place where the music had been eaten, and yet it was not silent. Out of the carved pale face, very faint, very far down under the grinding hunger of the blight, came a single slow sound that Harry had not noticed until now because it was so quiet and so patient and so wrong. It was a word. Same word over and over, said by no mouth, said by the carving itself, around and around without stopping. the way a wheel turns or a heart beats, and Harry could not hear what the word was, only that it never stopped, that it had not stopped in 400 years, and that everything else down here, the hunger, the forgetting, the slow unmaking of a whole nation's soul, was only the sound of that one carved word saying itself, and feeding on the city to keep saying itself forever. "There's a word," Harry whispered. He had gone very pale. "In the face, the carving it keeps, it won't stop saying itself. It's been saying itself the whole time, that the hungry thing. It's not eating to live, it's eating so it can keep saying the word." He looked up at Gornock and his green eyes were wide and certain. "It's a name. Somebody carved a name and made it so it could never stop saying itself, and saying it costs the singing. So it takes the singing. That's the whole thing. That's the whole curse. It's just a name that won't stop." The old goblin did not move. The red firelight ran over his cracked gray face and his white blind eye, and the cane was still in his scarred hands, and for a long moment the only sound was the hung city singing its dying song far below. Then Gornock said very quietly, in the voice of a man laying down a weight he has carried his whole life, "Scarnox must hear this." Scarnox was older than Gornock. Harry had not thought that was possible. The tally keeper lived in a hall of shelves that climbed out of sight into the dark, every shelf packed not with books but with blades and rings and torques and broken things, each one tagged with a strip of beaten lead, and Scarnox moved among them on a wheeled ladder, so small and so wrapped in gray that at first Harry took him for a bundle of cloth someone had left out. When he spoke, his voice was the thinnest Harry had ever heard, a whisper of dry leaves, and his eyes were both white, both blind, and he did not need them because he read the world the way Harry did, with the other sense, his long fingers drifting over the hung blades and feeling the names in them. Gornock spoke to him in the grinding tongue, low and fast, and the old tally keeper went still, and turned his blind face toward Harry and beckoned with one finger. "Come here, wizard child," he whispered. "Come and put your hand here and tell me what you feel, and if you lie to me I will know, because I have felt the truth and the lion metal for 300 years, and a child's tongue is no harder to read than tin." He laid Harry's hand on a blade that hung at the end of the row, a long thin knife, old beyond old, its edge gone to a soft gray line. The moment Harry's fingers touched it, the grinding note rose up out of it, the same hunger as the floor, the same word saying itself, fainter but unmistakable. "This one's sick too," Harry said. "It's got the word in it, the same one, the name that won't stop." He pressed his fingers to the cold metal and listened, and the more he listened the more certain he became, and the more frightened. The name in the little knife was the same name carved in the giant face at the root of the forge. The rot in the forge and the rot in this 300-year-old knife on a shelf were not two sicknesses, but one name said in 1,000 places at once, all of it the same single endless word. "It's all the same one," he said. "Everywhere it is, it's the same name saying itself. It's not lots of curses. It's one curse in lots of places, like the same song coming out of lots of radios." The tally keeper's blind face turned slowly to Gornock. He felt the join, Scarnox whispered. 300 years I have kept this blade as the truest sample of the blight we possess. And in 300 years no smith, no warder, no hired wizard with all his wands and his diagrams has felt what the child felt with his bare hand in a single breath, that it is one work, one name, one mind. The dry leaves of his voice trembled. "Gornock, do you understand what we are holding by the wrist? For 400 years we have fought the blight as a thing without an author, a weather, a rot. And here is a creature 7 years out of the cradle telling us, because he cannot help but tell us, that it has an author, that it has a name at its heart, and that the name is the wound and the weapon both." He drew his hand back from Harry's as though the boy had become hot. "A name can be answered, weather cannot, rot cannot, but a name," he did not finish. "The stone seat must decide," Gornock said. "The stone seat will be afraid," whispered Scarnox. "And a frightened council does foolish things to small wizards." But he was already moving toward the great doors at the end of the hall, on his wheeled ladder, ringing a small iron bell as he went, and the note of that bell, Harry noticed, was perfectly true, perfectly clean, made by a hand that meant it, and entirely free of the hungry word, the one sound in all the Undercity that the curse had never touched. They brought him before the stone seat that same hour, which Harry would later learn had never happened before in the history of the nation, that a human child should stand in the council cave under the mountain, while the lords of the Goblin nation looked down at him from their carved stone thrones. There were 9 of them. He felt the rightness of their forged ornaments and the heavy old strength of the stone they sat in, and he kept his back straight because the cupboard had taught him that the only thing you controlled when you were small and surrounded was whether you let them see you shake. One throne sat higher than the rest, and the goblin in it was not the oldest, and that, Harry understood at once, was the point, that this one ruled not by age but by something colder and harder. He was lean for a goblin, and his hands were ringed in iron, and his eyes were the flat gray of a winter sky, and when they settled on Harry they did not dismiss him and did not pity him. They priced him. Harry knew that look too. It was the look Vernon gave a thing he was deciding whether to keep or throw away, except that there was a mind behind it deep enough to drown in. "So this is the wizard's whelp who hears our shame," the high goblin said. His voice was quiet, and it carried to every corner of the cave. Gornuk, you took a muggle child below the stone, you showed him the heart forge, you broke 9 laws before breakfast, and you will answer for each. But first you will tell me why I should not have him bound and his memory burned blank and his small body returned to the surface to forget he was ever here." A younger, broader goblin to the left of the high throne shifted his grip on the haft of a great black war axe and said, in a voice like a landslide, "There is no why director, he is a wizard, he will grow into a wizard. Every wizard who has ever learned of the blight has used it against us or sold it to those who would. Burn it out of him and be done." His flat dark eyes found Harry's and held no malice at all, which was somehow worse than malice, only a soldier's plain arithmetic in which Harry was a risk to be subtracted. "I would not even leave him the road home, but the director is soft for the director." "You are Barog," Harry said. The cave went silent. The broad goblin's axe hand went still. "Gornuk said your name in the cart," Harry said into the silence, because someone had spoken to him and the cupboard had taught him that silence after a powerful person spoke was a trap, and the only way out of a trap was forward. "He said the captain of the Hammer Guard wouldn't like me." "You don't, that's all right. I wouldn't like me either if I were you. A wizard who can hear the thing you've been hiding for 400 years. That's the most dangerous person who could walk in your door." Back up at the high throne at the winter eyes that were pricing him. "But I can't unhear it, so you've got 3 things you can do. You can burn my memory, like you said, and lose the only person in 400 years who heard what the curse actually is. You can kill me and explain to the wizards why the boy who lived disappeared near Diagon Alley." He said it flatly. He did not yet fully understand what that name meant to them, only that it had moved through the cart when Gornuk learned it. "Or you can find out whether the thing I heard is true and whether the person who heard it can do anything about it. 2 of those waste me. One of them doesn't. I'd pick the one that doesn't, but I'm 7, so." For a long moment no one in the council cave said anything at all. Then from his low gray bundle at the foot of the throne, Scarnox the tally keeper laughed, a thin dry rustle, almost soundless. "Oh," he whispered, delighted and afraid at once, "he prices you back, Ragnok. The whelp prices you back." The director, Ragnok, had not moved. His ringed hands lay still on the arms of the stone throne, and his winter eyes had not left Harry once through the whole of it, and Harry could not begin to tell what was happening behind them except that it was vast and slow and as cold as the deep stone, and that his own life was somewhere inside it being weighed against 400 years. "Gornuk," Ragnok said at last, without looking away from the boy. "The blade Scarnox keeps, the truest sample. The child says it is the same work as the forge root, the same single name. Is it your judgment that he speaks the truth, and not the cleverness of a frightened child saying what old goblins wish to hear?" "It is my judgment," said Gornuk, "that in 400 years of warders, the boy is the first to stand on the ledge and not call it rust. He did not say what we wish to hear, director. We have wished for 4 centuries to hear that it was a wound, because a wound is no one's fault and no one's malice. He told us it was made. He told us it has an author and a name." The old goblin's scarred hands tightened on his cane. "I do not want that to be true. It is the worst thing I have heard in a long life. And I believe it utterly because the child had no reason to invent an enemy for us, and every reason to tell us what would make us love him, and he told us the thing that frightens me instead." Ragnok was quiet again. Far above and far below, the dying city sang. "Then we will see what the child is worth," he said. Chapter 1 end. Chapter 2. Breaking the unbreakable, they gave him a token so that he could come back. It was a flat disc of gray metal on a leather cord, no bigger than a penny, and when Gornuk pressed it into Harry's hand at the mouth of the cart tunnel that first night, the old goblin said only, "Wear it under your shirt, show it to no one. When you would come below, go to the alley behind the pub, touch it to the brick, and a door will know you." He paused. "It will also tell us always where the token is. Do not mistake this for trust. It is the opposite of trust. It is a leash and you are the thing on the end of it, but a leash that lets you come is better than a memory burned blank, which is what Barog wished and what the director has not yet decided against." His scarred fingers closed Harry's hand over the disc. "Come back tomorrow. The director wishes to see what you are worth, and so, old fool that I am, getting back to Privet Drive was the easy part. Getting back was always easy." The Dursleys had reported him lost to a tired policeman, collected him from a station they had not in fact left him at, a confusion Harry encouraged, because a confused story has no holes for questions, and by the time they reached Surrey, Vernon had decided the entire incident was Harry's fault and the matter was closed. No one asked where he had been for 6 hours. No one ever asked Harry where he had been. It was the single great convenience of being unwanted, and that summer Harry spent it like a coin he had been saving his whole life without knowing what for. The cupboard, he discovered, made an excellent place to leave a boy who was somewhere else. He went below 11 times in the next 3 weeks. The first thing he did was learn what they already knew, because the cupboard had taught him that the fastest way to look stupid was to solve a problem someone had already solved and not noticed. Scarnox was his teacher in this, the blind tally keeper rolling along his endless shelves while Harry trotted at the foot of the ladder, and the lesson was 400 years of failure, laid out like a battlefield after the battle. "First, the smith," Scarnox whispered. He took down a bar of black iron, its surface pitted in gray along one edge. When the blight was young and small, in the years our great-grandsires kept it secret even from themselves, the smiths did the smith's thing. They scoured. They struck the rot from the metal as you would strike scale from a billet, heated it white and hammered it clean. He held the bar out and Harry touched it and felt the truth of it, a place where the metal had been beaten clean of the hungry note, and beside it, creeping back the note again, the same single word saying itself, patient, returning. And it grew back, always it grew back, into the clean place, within a year, within a season, at last within a day. Because you cannot strike a name out of metal with a hammer. The hammer is a maker's tool, and the name is a maker's work, and the work simply remade itself in the wake of the hammer. The harder they scoured, the more fire they fed the forge, the more the blight had to eat. They were feeding it. It took us 100 years to understand we were feeding it. So they stopped scouring, Harry said. So they stopped scouring, then came the cutters. A different shelf, a different object, a ring, snapped clean in half. Curse-breakers, wizards brought down in secret, sworn and paid and watched. Clever folk, the cutters, they did not fight the rot. They sought the binding that held it to the forge. Every curse is tied to its anchor, they said. Find the tie and sever it, and the curse falls away with nowhere to live. And they found ties. Oh, they found many. They cut them. And every tie they cut, the blight grew a new one into the next nearest true thing, and another and another. The ring lay in 2 pieces on his gray palm. A curse-breaker named Ansel of Bruges, 2 centuries gone, cut 409 bindings in a single descent. He was very proud. We paid him in gold and sent him home. By the next moon the blight had 410 anchors, for it had learned from his cutting how many places it could live at once. The blind face turned toward Harry. Do you see the shape of it yet, child? Every weapon we have raised against it, it has eaten and made into a tooth. Scour it, you feed it. Cut it, you teach it to scatter. We have made it stronger for 400 years by fighting it well. And letting the forge go cold, Harry said. Gornuk told me you tried that. Starve it. The worst of all, whispered Scarnox. Cold forge remembers nothing. We thought to starve the blight of fire, and it starved us instead in the dark, with no living fire to renew the true work. The rot ate the city's memory 10 times as fast, for there was nothing being made to push back against the unmaking. We very nearly lost everything in the cold years. We lit the fire again and have not let it go out since, though it is the fire that feeds our enemy, because the only thing worse than the blight with fire is the blight without. He set the broken ring back on its shelf, gently, the way one returns a thing to grave. That is the whole of it. 400 years, 3 roads, all of them down. We do not even try now. We tend the forge and we keep the secret, and we measure how much the city has forgotten each century, and we wait to be a people who remember nothing. That is what you walked into off the street at 7 years old. Harry sat on the bottom rung of the ladder and thought. He was good at thinking. It was the one thing the cupboard had given him that he was grateful for. When you have nothing to do for hours in the dark, and no toys and no kind voice, your own mind becomes the only room you can move around in, and Harry had spent 7 years learning the furniture of his. He had learned that most problems were not as hard as they looked, that they only looked hard because everyone was holding them by the wrong end, and that the trick was almost always to stop asking the question everyone asked and ask the one underneath it. Everyone here had spent 400 years asking, how do we destroy the blight, and the blight had eaten every answer to that question and grown a tooth. You've been trying to kill it, Harry said slowly. All 3 ways, scouring, cutting, starving, they're all ways of trying to make it stop existing. He looked up at the blind old goblin. But it's a name saying itself. You can't make a name stop existing. A name isn't a thing, it's something happening. It's a wheel turning. He was finding it as he said it, the words running just ahead of the thought. You can't destroy a wheel turning by pushing on it. You push on a turning wheel, it just turns. You feed it, it spins faster. You stick a knife in it, it cuts the knife. His green eyes had gone wide and far away. You stop a wheel turning by, you don't push it the way it's going, and you don't push it the other way because then you're just fighting it. You stop a wheel by, he stopped. By taking out the thing that makes it turn, he said. Scarnox had gone very still on his ladder. Every wheel turns because something makes it turn, Harry said, faster now, standing up. And everything that keeps doing itself over and over, it has to have a way it started and a way it'd stop. If you wind a clock, it ticks until it runs down. If you push a swing, it swings until it stops. The only things that go forever are things somebody built to go forever, and even those, he turned to face the old goblin fully. Scarnox, the name's been saying itself for 400 years. Saying a name costs something, it costs the singing, it eats the city to pay for saying itself one more time, so it has to keep eating or it'd stop, right? It's not free, nothing's free, it's paying to keep going. He held up the gray token from around his neck, the leash, turning it over in the red light. So I don't have to destroy it, I have to make it stop being able to pay. And here his voice dropped because he had reached the underneath question, the one no one had asked in 4 centuries, or I have to find the place where whoever built it put the off. Because whoever builds a thing to run forever always builds a way to stop it. Always, you have to, or the first time it goes wrong it eats you too. He looked up. Whoever made this curse, he didn't trust it not to turn on him. Nobody would, so somewhere in it there's a way to make it stop. He hid it, but it's there, it has to be there. For a long moment the only sound in the hall of shelves was the dry, endless singing of the dying city far below. Before he could find the maker's off-word, he had to map the curse, and the mapping took 6 nights and taught him the size of what he was fighting. Skarnox gave him the Cursebreaker's diagrams, 4 centuries of them, brittle vellum covered in the careful geometry of clever wizards, each one a record of a clever wizard being wrong. Harry spread them on the lore hall floor and crawled over them with a candle, and what he saw, slowly, was a kind of museum of misunderstanding. Each diagram drew the blight as a knot to be untied, a tangle of bindings with the curse hiding in the middle, and each Cursebreaker had spent his descent hunting the center of the tangle, the one binding that held all the others, the keystone, and there was no keystone because the blight was not a tangle. It was a loop. It had no center to cut because it had no center at all. It only went around, and every clever wizard who cut into it had simply opened the loop and watched it close behind his blade like water behind an oar. They drew it as a building, Harry said on the 4th night, sitting back on his heels among the brittle vellum. All of them. A building has a keystone, pull the right stone and the arch falls, so they kept hunting the keystone, but it's not a building. He hunted the word and found it in something Gornuk had said. It's a wheel. A wheel doesn't have a keystone. You can't pull one stone and stop a wheel, it just goes around. And they kept drawing the wheel as a building and stabbing at where the keystone should be, and there was nothing there because the strength of a wheel isn't in any one place, it's in the going around. The turning is the thing. The name saying itself is the thing. You can't cut the turning, you can only stop it. Skarnox, blind on his ladder, went very still. 400 years of the wisest wizards of the age, he whispered, and not one drew a wheel. Because they all wanted to be the one who pulled the keystone, Harry said. It's a better story. The clever wizard who finds the one secret stone and saves the goblins and goes home a hero. Nobody wants the boring answer, which is that there's no stone, there's just a thing going around, and you have to figure out what's turning it. He looked up at the old goblin. I don't need to be the hero, I just need it to stop. That's an easier thing to want, and it lets you see the wheel. He spent the 5th night and the 6th listening to the wheel turn, learning its revolution the way you learn a song by hearing it enough times, the name saying itself, the cost paid, the song eaten, the name saying itself again, around and around, 400 years deep. And by the 6th night he could feel the place where the turning was driven, the carved pale face at the forge root where the name was cut, and he understood that to stop the wheel he would have to go to the axle, to the face itself, and put his hands on it, and that the axle was the most dangerous place in the deep stone, because it was where the curse was strongest, and where, if it ever noticed him, it would be able to reach him. In 400 years, Skarnox whispered at last, no one has asked where the Maker put the off. His blind face had come fully around to Harry, and his thin voice shook. We asked how to break it. We never asked how he would have broken it. We never thought of him as a he at all. Child, he came down off the ladder, slow and careful with his 300 years, and stood before Harry no taller than the boy's shoulder, and reached up and laid one gray finger against Harry's brow as though taking a reading. There is a halting word. There is always a halting word. The makers of old never built a binding they could not unbind, for the reason you have just spoken. They feared their own work more than any enemy. It is the first law of the deep craft, and I have not thought of it in 200 years because I stopped thinking of the blight as a made thing. He drew his hand back. It is carved in the forge face, it must be. The Maker would have hidden it where no one would look, in plain sight, in the curse itself, in the very name. Gornuk. He raised his thin voice toward the doors. Gornuk, fetch the director. The whelp has found the door. Now we must find the key. It took them 9 more nights to read the face. Harry came down each night, and they put him before the carved pale face at the root of the heart forge, on a platform of black stone slung out over the fire, where the heat pressed on him like a hand and the hungry word ground in his bones, and he listened, and Skarnox read the old carvings with his fingers and his blind sight, and Gornuk watched, and twice Ragnarok came and stood in the shadows and said nothing and watched too, his winter eyes pricing the boy by firelight. The face was a forest of names. That was the Maker's cleverness, and Harry came to understand it slowly, with a sick admiration he tried not to feel. Around the carved pale face, cut into the black stone in a script so old that even Skarnox read it haltingly, ran 10,000 goblin names, the true names of the nation, the deep names that goblins carried and never spoke, the names that the work remembered. The Maker had carved the whole nation's soul around the face of his curse. And every one of those true names, to Harry's other sense, sang true, sang clean, the real names of real beings, except that running through all of them, under all of them, was the one false note, the one word that was not a true name at all, the word that said itself and ate the rest. He hid it in the choir, Harry said, on the 7th night, hoarse from the heat. The off word, it's not separate from the names, it's wearing them. It sounds like one of the true names, but it isn't one. It's a fake name pretending to be a real one, standing in the middle of all the real ones, so that when you listen you just hear the real ones singing and you don't notice the fake one stealing from them. He pressed his palms to his temples. That's why scouring didn't work. You were striking the real names. You were hurting the choir to get at the one thief hiding in it. Every time you struck, you killed real names and the thief just moved to stand behind a different one. Can you find it? Ragnar's voice from the shadows, the first thing he had said in 3 nights. The false name, among 10,000 true. Can you hear which one is the thief? I don't know, Harry said honestly. There's a lot of them, and they all sound they're loud. The thief's quiet. It hides under the loud ones. He looked at the vast, pale, carved face, the shadow pits of its eyes. But it's the one that doesn't belong to anybody. All the real names, if I touch them, they reach back. They know whose they are, like the coins. The thief won't reach back. The thief's got nobody on the other end. It's a name with no person. He swallowed. I can find it, but I have to touch them, one at a time, until I find the one that's empty. There are 10,000, said Gornock quietly. Then I'd better start, said Harry. The curse nearly killed him on the 9th night. He had narrowed it. 6 nights of touching true names, working inward across the carved face section by section, ruling out the choirs that sang back, closing on a knot of older script near the carved mouth where the singing went strange and thin. The false name was in there. He could feel it now, a cold spot in the warm choir, a place where the music bent around an absence. He pressed both hands flat to the black stone over the carved pale mouth and reached his other sense down into the knot of old names to find the empty one, the thief, the name with nobody home, and the curse felt him reach. It was the first time it had ever noticed him. For 9 nights he had been a listener, and a listener takes nothing, and the curse had no defense against being heard because being heard cost it nothing. But the moment Harry reached into it, the moment he stopped listening and began to hunt, the hungry word turned over, slow and vast, like a sleeping thing in deep water turning to face a swimmer, and it found him. It found that he was full of the thing it ate. A wizard child 7 years old, brimful of unspent intent, untrained, undefended, his whole bright soul wide open and reaching, and the blight which had eaten the soul out of metal for 400 years a thimbleful at a time, opened under Harry's hands like a mouth and pulled. He felt it take the first of him. It was not pain, it was worse than pain. It was the color going out of a thing while you watched. He felt a memory go gray and empty. The spider in the cupboard, the morning he had liked, simply forgot how to matter to him, eaten unmade, and then it reached for the next, and Harry understood in a flat instant of pure animal horror that it would eat him the way it ate the coins, that it would take everything he was and leave a body that did not remember being made. And that it would do it in seconds because he was so much softer and so much fuller than 400-year-old iron, and the only thing that saved him was the same thing that had brought him here. He felt it coming. That was his whole gift in the end. He heard the structure of things, and he heard the curse's hunger reach the next handhold a half-second before it closed, heard it the way he had heard the dead coin's cold tug, and his body, trained by 7 years of a fist that came out of the dark, trained to flinch before the blow landed, tore his hands off the black stone and threw him backward off the platform before his mind had finished the thought. He hit the iron grating. The connection broke. And the curse robbed howled not with sound. The howl was in the other place, a vast frustrated grinding that rolled up out of the Heartforge and through the whole hanging city, so that 10,000 goblins woke in their beds in the dark with their teeth aching and did not know why. Gornock reached him first. The old goblin had moved faster than anything his age should move, and his scarred hands were on Harry's shoulders, hauling the boy back from the edge, and Harry was shaking, both hands clamped to his own chest as though to hold himself in. His face the color of the marble in the hall above, and there was a place inside him where the spider morning had been, and now there was nothing, a gray hole, a small, swept-clean absence that he could feel the edges of and not the middle. And it frightened him more than anything in his life ever had, more than the cupboard, more than the fist. It ate part of me, he whispered. Gornock, it ate part of me. There's a hole. It took a piece and now I can't find it. The old goblin held the shaking boy by the shoulders and looked at him with the black living eye and the white blind one, and his cracked gray face did the complicated thing again, the thing it had done in the marble hall, and this time he did not hide it. Pulled Harry against the rough cloth of his coat, scarred hands flat against the boy's back, and held him there on the iron grating over the fire while the curse's howl died away into the deep stone. I have buried sons, Gornock said very low into the boy's wild black hair. I am too old for sympathy. I told you so the first hour. I lied. Old goblins lie about their hearts the way old soldiers lie about their wounds. He held the boy until the shaking eased. It took a small thing, a morning. A spider, you told me of it in the cart. I remember it for you. Do you hear me, child? The spider in the cupboard that built and that you liked to watch. I hold it now. The curse cannot eat what is in me. My soul is goblin iron, and it has had 400 years to learn it cannot eat me. When this is done, I will give the morning back to you the only way the old can, by telling you of it until it is yours again. But you will not touch that face again tonight. You will not touch it again at all until you can do it without bleeding your soul into its mouth. He set the boy back at arm's length, scarred hands gripping. Do you understand me, Harry Potter? You have found the door and you have found very nearly the key. You will not die turning it. I forbid it. I who have no authority over you at all forbid it." And Harry, who had been held perhaps 3 times in his life that he could remember, and never once like that, looked at the old goblin and could not speak, and so he only nodded, and that was the one beat of it, and it was enough, and they let it pass. The answer came to him in the cupboard 2 days later in the dark, where all his best answers came. He had been turning it over and over. The curse ate intent, ate making, ate the soul that goes into work things and reaching children. It ate makers and made things alike. That was its whole nature. It consumed craft. And every weapon they had ever raised against it had been craft. Scouring was craft. Cutting was craft. The Cursebreaker's diagrams were craft. Even Harry's reaching had been a kind of craft, a making, a doing, and the moment he had reached to do something to it, it had eaten the doing, eaten him, because doing was food. So you could not do anything to it. Anything you did, it ate. But he had stood before it for 9 nights doing nothing, only listening, and it had never touched him, because listening was not craft. Listening took nothing, made nothing, reached for nothing. Listening was not food. It was the one thing in all the world the curse could not eat, because it was the one act that gave the curse nothing to consume. And the off-word, the halting condition, the Maker's secret door, Scarnox had said it would be hidden in the very name. A false name, pretending to be a true one. A true name is a thing you are, a false name is a thing pretending. And the way you stop a pretender is not by fighting it, fighting feeds it. The way you stop a pretender is to say what it actually is, to name the thing not by its stolen name but by its true nature. The curse was a name that said, "I am one of you, I am a true name, I belong in the choir, feed me," and it could go on saying that forever, eating the choir to pay for the lie, as long as no one ever answered it. It had never been answered. In 400 years, no one had ever spoken back to it. They had struck it, cut it, starved it. No one had ever simply told it the truth about itself. You did not break the curse by making something. You broke it by saying something. And saying was a kind of listening turned around. It took nothing, made nothing, only named. The curse could not eat a naming any more than it could eat a listening, because a true naming did not reach into the curse to take or change anything. It simply was true, and a recursion built on a lie cannot survive being told the truth, because the lie is the only thing holding it together. Harry sat in the dark of the cupboard with his knees against his chest and felt the gray hole where the spider morning had been, and he understood, with the cold, clean certainty that had brought him down the white steps in the first place, exactly how to end it. "It's not a fight," he said aloud to the dark. "It was never a fight, that's why they kept losing. You can't win a fight with a thing that eats fighting, you just have to tell it the truth and not flinch while it dies." He went down the next night and he told them, and Barog laughed. "He will speak to it," the captain of the Hammer Guard said to the council assembled at the forge root, his black axe across his knees. 400 years of smiths and cutters, and the wizard child's answer is to have a conversation with it. But there was less stone in his voice than there had been 3 weeks past, because Barog had also seen the curse very nearly eat the boy whole and had watched the boy come back down anyway, and a soldier respects a thing that comes back down. If he is wrong, it eats him in front of us and we are done with the question of what to do with him. If he is right, he did not finish. He did not believe there was a right, but he had stopped being certain there was not, and for Barog that was a great distance traveled. "He will not stand alone before it," Gornuk said flatly. "I will anchor him. My soul it cannot eat. If it reaches for him, I pull him out as I pulled him before." "And if it reaches for you through him?" Ragnarok asked. The director had come down to the forge root himself and stood now at the edge of the black platform with the fire under him, and his winter eyes were on Harry. "You stake the nation's eldest warder on a child's theory of names." "I stake myself," said Gornuk. "The choice is mine to make, and I have made it." Ragnarok looked at the old goblin for a long moment, then he looked at Harry, and Harry looked back and did not flinch, because flinching was the one thing he could not afford to do tonight of all nights, and he had decided to start practicing now. "Tell me what you will do, child," Ragnarok said. "Not what you hope, what you will do." "I'm going to put my hands on the face," Harry said, "and I'm not going to reach into it, because that's food. I'm just going to find the thief, the false name, the empty one with nobody home. I've nearly got it, it's in the knot by the mouth. And when I've found it, I'm not going to push on it or cut it or scour it. I'm going to say what it really is, out loud. I'm going to tell it that it's not a true name, that it's got nobody on the other end, that it's a theft wearing a name. And it can't eat that because I'm not reaching in, I'm just saying. And a thing that only stays alive because everyone believes its lie can't stay alive once somebody says the truth to its face and means it." He looked at the vast pale carving and his green eyes were very steady. "It's been saying I belong here for 400 years and nobody ever said no you don't. That's the off word. Somebody just has to say no and mean it and not flinch while it tries to make them flinch." He looked back at Ragnarok. "That's what I'll do." The director was silent. The fire roared softly below. Far up and far down, the hanging city sang its 400-year-old dying song, and every goblin lord on the black platform had been born into that song and had thought to die into its silence. "Then do it," said Ragnarok, "and we will see what the child is worth." Harry put his hands on the face. The black stone was warm. Gornuk stood at his back with one scarred hand flat between the boy's shoulder blades, an anchor of goblin iron the curse could not eat, and Scarnox crouched at the platform's edge with his blind face raised, reading, and Barog stood with his axe, and Ragnarok stood with his winter eyes, and the whole council of the stone seat watched a 7-year-old human boy lean his small weight into the carved mouth of the thing that had been killing their nation since before their grandsires were struck from the fire. Harry listened. He found the choir, 10,000 true names singing in the dark. He let them sing. He did not reach. He moved his attention through them the way you move your eyes across a crowded room without touching anyone, looking for the one face that is watching you back, and he came to the knot by the mouth, the cold place, the absence, and there it was. The thief, a name shaped exactly like a true name, sitting in the middle of the choir, singing I belong, feed me, I belong, and behind it, nobody. No soul on the other end of the name, a name with a hollow where a person should be. The emptiest thing Harry had ever felt, and the hungriest. It felt him find it. The vast slow thing turned to face him again, the mouth opening in the other place, the pull beginning, reaching for the bright full soul leaning into its face, and Harry did not reach back, and did not flinch, and did not push or cut or scour or run. He said out loud in the firelight in a voice that shook and did not stop, "You're not a real name. There's nobody on the other end of you. You're a hole pretending to be a person. Everything you've eaten for 400 years, you ate it to keep pretending, and it never made you real because you can't make yourself real by eating other people's real. You don't belong in the choir, you never did. You're a thief wearing a name, and the name was never yours, and I know it, and now you know I know it." He pressed his small hands flat against the carved pale mouth, and the curse pulled at him with 400 years of hunger, and he leaned into it and said, "No, you don't belong here." And the curse tried to make him flinch. It showed him the cupboard. It showed him the gray hole where the spider morning had been, and promised him 1,000 more like it. It reached into him for the bright full soul and pulled with everything it had. 4 centuries of accumulated hunger focused down to a single point on a single 7-year-old boy. And Harry felt the color begin to go out of another memory, and another, and he held on to the one true thing he had. "You don't belong here, you're a thief, I'm not afraid of you," and he did not flinch, because Gornuk's scarred hand was flat against his back and would not let him fall. And because somewhere deep under all of it, where the cupboard had built him, Harry Potter had decided a long time ago that he would rather be eaten telling the truth than live a single hour more being afraid of a lie. He did not flinch. And the curse, which had eaten every weapon ever raised against it and grown a tooth, met the one thing it could not eat, a true word spoken to its face with no reaching, nothing to consume, nothing to turn into a tooth, only the flat, unmovable fact of itself laid bare, and the recursion, 400 years of a lie saying itself, came at last to the one input it had never been given. It was told the truth. And it had no answer for the truth because it was built entirely of a lie, and a lie that is named has nowhere left to stand. The hungry word stopped. It did not explode. It did not howl. It simply stopped saying itself, the way a wheel stops when the thing that turned it is taken out, the way a clock stops when it is finally, after 4 centuries, allowed to run all the way down. The false name in the knot by the mouth went silent, and then it was not there at all, not destroyed, not scoured, not cut, unsaid, gone the way a word is gone when the speaker stops speaking it, leaving the 10,000 true names singing in the dark with nothing hiding among them any more. And then, like a held breath let go after 400 years, the choir swelled. It rushed up out of the heart forge and through the black platform and up the hanging streets and into every blade and ring and lintel and lock in all the undercity at once. 4 centuries of stolen song, all the intent the blight had eaten and held and never been able to use, released back into the work it had been taken from. The dulled blades remembered their edges. The loosened wards remembered their shapes. The forgotten locks in vaults a mile deep remembered in a single ringing instant exactly what they were for. The whole vast inverted city, which had been singing its dying song since before any goblin now living was born, drew one enormous breath of red firelight and began all at once to sing the way it had sung when it was new. Harry took his hands off the warm black stone. The carved pale face was only a carving now. The pull was gone. The grinding was gone. Where the curse had been there was only the clean roar of the heart forge and the rising song of a nation remembering itself. And the boy stood swaying at the edge of the fire with Gornuk's scarred hand flat between his shoulders, and he was crying, which he had not done in front of anyone since he was 4 and had learned what it cost, and he could not stop, and for once no one was going to make him pay for it. The remembering reached the living, too, and that was the thing none of them had braced for. Across the hung city in the same breath, 10,000 goblins felt their own work wake under their hands. The smith felt the half-made blade on his anvil remember suddenly and completely what it was meant to become. The warder felt a lattice she had nursed along for 60 failing years stand up straight and true and sing. The old ones who had touched goblin work their whole lives and felt it always very slightly forgetting, felt it for the first time hold. People who had grown up inside a dying song heard, all at once, what the song had sounded like when it was whole, and the sound of it was almost unbearable because it was the sound of everything they had lost without ever quite knowing they were losing it, given back in a single ringing instant by a child none of them had met. There were goblins who wept in the streets of the default that night, who had not wept since their first century and did not know why and did not need to. The work had come home. The nation had its soul back, and the only ones who knew yet why were the 9 lords on the black platform and the small swaying boy at the edge of the fire. On the black platform, the lords of the Goblin nation stood in the rising song and did not speak. Barog had let the haft of his great axe slip until its head rested on the iron grating, forgotten. Scarnox the tally-keeper, 300 years blind, had turned his face up into the swelling music with an expression Harry had no word for. And Ragnok the director, the stone seat who priced everything, stood at the edge of the fire with his winter eyes on the small, crying human boy who had just done in 9 breaths what 400 years and the wisest of 2 peoples had not done at all, and for the first time since Harry had met him, the pricing was over. The director of Gringotts went down on one knee on the black stone before a 7-year-old child, and the 8 other lords of the stone seat, one by one, did the same, and the whole hanging city sang. Chapter 2 end. Chapter 3, Friend of the Forge. A nation does not know what to do with a miracle. In the 3 days after the blight stopped, the Undercity did not celebrate. Harry had expected celebration. He had broken the thing that was killing them. In the books he had read in the back of the school library, that was the part where everyone cheered and lifted you up. Instead, the default went quiet in a way that frightened him more than the curse had, a held, watchful, listening quiet, as 10,000 goblins walked their remembering streets and laid their hands on doors and rails and locks they had known their whole lives, and felt the work singing true under their palms for the first time, and did not know whether to weep or to be afraid of the small human child who had done it, because the work singing true was a stranger to most of them. The blight was older than anyone alive. Goblins below the age of 400 had never once in their lives touched goblin work that was not, very slightly, forgetting itself. They had grown up with the dying song and called it the sound of the world, and now the world sounded different all at once in a single night because of a wizard, and a goblin does not trust a sudden gift from a wizard. A goblin has 400 years of reasons not to, and 1,000 more behind those. Harry felt the weight of it the 3rd night, walking the hung streets at Gornuk's side toward the council cave, the goblins they passed going silent and still and watching him with their quick black eyes, and he said, "Lo, they're afraid of me." "Yes," said Gornuk, "because I'm a wizard who can do something no goblin can do to the most secret thing they have. Yes." "That's reasonable," Harry said and meant it, and Gornuk glanced down at him with the black living eye and said nothing, because there was nothing to add to a child who had already understood the hardest part. Up in the sun, the world that had not noticed him go did not notice him return. Harry climbed back into the cupboard before dawn with the gray token cold against his chest and lay in the dark listening to the house wake, Vernon's tread, the kettle, Dudley's whine through the ceiling, and the strangeness of it pressed on him until he could hardly breathe. A nation a mile under London had spent 2 nights arguing whether to kill him or make him kin, and up here Aunt Petunia rapped the cupboard door and told him to mind the bacon didn't burn as she had every morning of his life, and would not have believed a word of it if he'd told her, and he was never going to tell her, and that was the whole of his life now. The largest thing in the world held silent behind his teeth while he turned the bacon. He found he did not mind. He had expected to mind. A boy who has finally been seen ought to want, more than anything, to be seen by the people who never saw him. But standing at the stove that morning, watching Vernon read the paper through and around him as though he were a draft from a badly fitted window, Harry felt none of the old ache. The ache had needed an audience. It had whispered all those years that if they would only look, they would see he mattered, and now an entire people had looked and seen and struck his name into their iron, and the whisper had nothing left to say. Vernon's not looking could not hurt a boy who had been claimed by a forge. It had simply become weather. "You're quiet," Petunia said sharp over the bacon. She did not like quiet. Quiet in the boy meant the boy was thinking, and she had never trusted what the boy thought. "Sorry, Aunt Petunia," Harry said, and meant nothing by it, and she frowned at him because the sorry had no fear in it, and the fear had always been the part she relied on, and she could not have said how she knew it was gone. He went to school. He came home. He waited for the dark, and when it came he touched the token to the brick behind the pub, and a door that knew him opened in the wall, and he went down into the only place in the world that had ever wanted him, to find out what they had decided to do with him. The stone seat convened to decide what he was, and the argument lasted 2 nights, and Harry was made to wait outside it, which he minded, because the thing they were deciding was his life, and he thought he should at least be allowed to hear them get it wrong. Griffook brought him the shape of it in pieces, slipping out between sessions, ambitious and indiscreet, and not above trading what he knew for the small human's growing favor. The law, Griffook explained, was the trouble. Not sentiment. Goblins did not legislate by sentiment, but law, the deep old law of debt and weregild and name honor that had governed the nation since before the White House was built above. "You have placed the nation in a debt," Griffook said, crouched beside Harry in the tunnel mouth, his voice dropping with the relish of forbidden arithmetic. "Do you understand what that means to us? A debt is not a feeling. A debt is a weight, a real thing as real as gold, and it must be balanced or the one who carries it is diminished, in law, in standing, in the eyes of the work itself. You have done the nation a service that cannot be priced, and so the nation owes a debt that cannot be paid, and an unpayable debt is the most dangerous thing in goblin law, because a people who cannot balance their books are a people who have lost their honor, and a goblin without honor is, he made a sharp gesture across his own throat. We would rather die than carry a debt we cannot pay. So, he grinned, all teeth. Barog's faction says the cleanest balance is to pay you in the old coin your silence, and then your death, for a dead creditor cancels the debt and tells no tales. Skarnox's faction says the law provides another road, an old one almost never walked, and that to walk it would balance the debt not by ending you but by binding you, by making you no longer a wizard to whom the nation owes a debt, but something the nation does not owe debts to at all, because it is part of the nation's own honor. His grin widened. They are fighting about which kind of thing you are, a creditor to be cancelled or a friend to be forged. What's a friend? Harry asked. Griffook's grin faded and something almost like awe moved across his sharp young face. Vorn Carrag, he said quietly. Friend of the Forge, it has been granted 4 times since the White House was built, and the White House was built 900 years ago. There is no goblin alive who has seen it given. It is the right by which a creature not born of the fire is made kin to it anyway, given the lore that is never written down, the warcraft that is never shown to wizards, the smithing that no human has been taught in 1,000 years, and the protection of the nation, which means that to lift a hand against you is to lift a hand against all of us, and we will answer it as we answer any attack on our own. He shook his head slowly. It is the highest honor we have, and it is not a gift, human. Do not think it a gift, it is a binding. It binds the nation to you, yes, but it binds you to the nation. A friend of the Forge has duties as heavy as his rights. The old ones say it is easier to refuse it than to carry it. He stood as the council doors began to grind open, and they are about to decide whether to offer it to a 7-year-old who lives in a cupboard. I would not have believed it if I had not heard it with my own ears. The council doors were old and thick, but goblin stone carried sound the way water carries cold, and Harry, sitting in the tunnel mouth where they had left him, heard the argument come through the floor. It was Barog he heard first, because Barog's voice was the kind that went through stone. A wizard. Say the word as many soft ways as you like, Tally Keeper, and at the bottom of all of them is a wizard. I have buried 300 of my Hammerguard in wars the wizards started, and the wizards ended on their own terms while we paid in iron and blood. And now one walks in off the street, a child, and within a moon you would carve our deepest weakness into him and call it kinship. I have stood guard over this nation for 200 years. I will not stand guard over the door we opened ourselves. Then Skarnox, thin and dry and unhurried, and Harry had to strain to catch it. You speak of the wizards' wars, Barog, and you are right to, but name me the war the goblins won. Name me one. We did not win them. We survived them behind our law and our stone, growing a little smaller and a little more forgotten with each one, until the law and the stone were all we had left, and we mistook surviving for strength. A pause. The blight would have finished what the wars began. In 200 more years there would have been no nation here to guard, Captain, only a people who had forgotten how to forge, sitting in a dark that had forgotten how to sing. You know this, you have felt the work dulling in your own axe, and a child stopped it, not our wisest smith, not our oldest warder. A starved human child of 7 years who heard in one breath the thing we spent 4 centuries refusing to hear. You call that a door we opened. I call it the first thing that has gone right for this nation in 400 years, and I will not see us murder it out of an old habit of fearing the sun. And when he is grown, that was Ragnarok, quiet, cutting under both of them. When the boy is a man and the wizards have made him theirs as they make everything theirs, and he remembers that he knows where the nation's throat is bared, then we will have a friend of the Forge in the heart of the wizard's world, said Skarnox, instead of an enemy who knows our secret and owes us nothing. You weigh director, so weigh this, the boy already knows. That cannot be undone but by killing him, and to kill the thing that saved us is to spit in the fire that made us, and any nation that would do such a thing has already forgotten what it is and deserves the dark. Harry heard the dry voice harden into something old and absolute. The law is plain, the right exists, it was built for exactly this and has waited 900 years to be used a 5th time. I am the tally keeper, I keep the law. And I tell you the debt is real, and the road to balance it honorably is one road only, and you all know which road it is, and you are afraid of it, and your fear is not a reason. Ford the friend. There was a silence then, long enough that Harry thought the doors had thickened. When Ragnarok spoke again, his voice had changed, not warmer but settled, the voice of a creature who has finished weighing and found the scale tipped against his own caution. Bring the boy in, the director said. I have 3 questions for him. If his answers are a child's answers, we cancel the creditor and bear the shame. If they are not, a pause Harry would remember. Then we forge the friend, and may the fire forgive us if Barog is right. The doors began to grind open. Harry stood and brushed the tunnel dust from his knees and went in to answer for his life. They asked him 3 questions, and Harry understood that the 3 questions were the whole of it, that everything turned on them, and he answered them the way he answered everything that mattered, which was plainly and without flinching and with the truth. Ragnar asked the first, "If we make you friend of the Forge, the nation's lore is yours, including the lore of how we are weak and where and how we might be broken. A wizard with that knowledge could end us as surely as the blight and faster." "Why should the stone seat put the nation's throat in a child's hand?" "You shouldn't," Harry said. "Not because I'm safe, because I'm 7 and I might grow up wrong and you can't know that I won't. Putting your throat in anyone's hand is a bad idea and you're right to hate it." He looked up at the winter eyes. "But you've already done it. I already heard the thing you kept secret for 400 years. I already stood at the root of your forge. I already know the shape of how you're weak, not all of it, but the worst of it, the part you most needed hidden, and you can't unknow me knowing it. So the throat's already in my hand. The only question left is whether I'm holding it as your enemy or your friend." He paused. "I'd rather be your friend, but that's my answer, not a guarantee. You don't get a guarantee. Nobody who matters ever offered you a guarantee, and the ones who did were lying." Skarnox made the dry rustling sound that was his laugh. Barog asked the second, his black axe across his knees. "A friend of the Forge takes up the nation's quarrels as his own. We have enemies, wizard child, old ones and the new one you have just woken, for do not think the tally keeper has not told us his fear, that the thing your curse fed has now stopped being fed. If you're a friend, his quarrel is your quarrel, and you do not get to choose your ground. You will stand where the nation stands, against what the nation stands against, even when it would be wiser to run. Can a wizard do that? Your kind run from our quarrels, you always have." "I don't know if I can," Harry said, and the cave went still because no one expected the boy to say it. "I'm 7. I've never been in a fight I chose. I don't know what I'll do when something's actually trying to kill me, and running would be smart." He held Barog's flat, dark gaze. "But I know what I did 3 nights ago. The curse tried to make me flinch, and I didn't, and not because I'm brave. I was so frightened I cried for an hour after, but because I decided beforehand that I wasn't going to, and then when it came I just did the thing I decided. That's all I've got. I can't promise I'm brave. I can promise I'll decide beforehand and that I keep what I decide. You've watched me come back down to that face 9 times after it nearly ate me. That's the only evidence either of us has about what I'll do. You can weigh it or not." Barog said nothing, but the haft of the great axe turned once in his hands slowly, which Harry would learn much later was the nearest thing to a yes that Barog gave anyone. Gornuk asked the third, and his voice was different from the others, and the cave knew it and quieted further. "A friend of the Forge's kin," the old warder said. "Not ally, not creditor, kin. We will be bound to you as to our own blood, and you to us. And you are a child of wizards, with a wizard's life waiting above a school in 4 years, and a destiny they have already written for you whether you have read it or not. Kin pulls. Ours will pull you down into the stone, into our quarrels and our craft and our long memory. Theirs will pull you up into the sun, into their war and their fame and their use of you. A creature pulled 2 ways is torn." The black eye and the white held the boy. "Why would you take a kinship that will tear you, Harry Potter, when you could walk back up into the sun and be only what they wish you to be?" And Harry, who had been asked many questions in his life but never that one, was quiet for a long moment in the firelight. "Because nobody up there is pulling," he said. He had not meant to say it. It came out flat and small and true, the way the deepest things did, and he heard it land in the silence of the cave and could not call it back. "They wrote me a destiny," he said, "but nobody up there's pulling on me because nobody up there wants me. The people who are supposed to want me put me in a cupboard, and the famous ones who wrote my destiny haven't come once in 7 years to see if the destiny's still alive. You say kin pulls 2 ways and I'll be torn, but you can't be torn between 2 pulls when only one side's pulling. There's nothing up there holding the other end, there's just a rope they tied to me and let go of." Dick Gornuk and his green eyes were dry and very steady. "You're the first thing in my whole life that ever pulled, all of you. You heard me, you came back, you held the morning the curse ate so I wouldn't lose it. Nobody up there ever did one of those things." He squared his small shoulders. "So I'm not choosing between 2 families and getting torn. I'm choosing the only one that ever pulled. That's not a hard choice, that's the easiest one I've ever made." The fire roared softly at the root of the forge. The hanging city sang its new true song far above and far below, and Gornuk, master warder of the Understone, 300 years old and too old for sympathy, turned his face away from the council for a moment, and when he turned it back the black living eye was wet and he did not pretend it wasn't. "Director," the old goblin said, his dry voice rough, "I have asked my question and been answered. I move that we forge the friend." "It is moved," said Skarnox before Ragnar could speak. "And seconded by the tally keeper who keeps the right and who tells you it is owed, the law is plain, to the one who breaks a curse no smith could break. The old ones provided for this. They knew somehow that a day might come when the nation's salvation walked in from outside the fire. They built the right for exactly this child 4 times in 900 years, and this is the 5th, and it is owed." Every eye turned to Ragnar. The director sat in the highest stone seat with his ringed hand still on its arms, and his winter eyes moved once around the council to Barog, who had turned his axe, to Skarnox, who kept the law, to Gornuk, who did not bother to hide his wet eye, and at last to the small human boy standing alone on the black stone, who had just told the lords of the Goblin nation without a tremor that they were the only thing in his life that had ever wanted him. Ragnar was a cold creature. He had priced 10,000 bargains and lost not one, and he had not survived to hold the stone seat by letting his heart move his mouth. He looked at the boy and he did the thing he always did, the thing he could not stop doing, which was to weigh. He weighed a friend of the forge in the wizarding world. A creature the goblins could find anywhere, aid anywhere, reach anywhere, who would grow up inside the world of wands carrying goblin loyalty in his bones, an early warning, a hidden hand, a door into the sunlit world that had spent 900 years treating the goblin nation as a vault to be guarded and a war to be remembered and a people never, ever to be made kin. He weighed what such a creature would be worth in 20 years and 50. In the quiet war the goblins had been losing politely since the White House was built. And then he weighed the other thing, the thing he did not have a column for, the thing he had watched on the black platform 3 nights past when the boy had wept in the rising song with the old warder's hand between his shoulders, and had felt something move in his own iron chest that he did not have a price for and did not like. The stone seat has heard the child, Ragnarok said, his quiet voice filled the cave. It has heard him answer for the throat and the quarrel and the kinship, and it finds his answers sufficient. He rose from the high seat and the whole council rose with him. We will not pay our debt in the old coin, we will not cancel the creditor. The nation of the deep stone does not murder the thing that saved it. Let any people that would do so be unmade and forgotten, and good riddance. His winter eyes found Harry's. We will forge the friend, let the right be made ready, let the fire be banked and woken, and let it be carved in the new singing stone that on this night the nation found at its root not only a curse, but the child who broke it and named him not enemy, not creditor, but kin. He inclined his head a fraction, the smallest motion, and from Ragnarok it was an earthquake. Welcome to the fire, Harry Potter. Try not to make us regret it more than twice a year. The rite was made in the Heartforge at the deepest hour, and Harry would carry the shape of it for the rest of his life. They did not dress it up. Goblins did not dress things up. A rite to them was not a show but a working, a thing forged like any other, meant to hold. They brought him to the black platform over the fire where he had broken the curse, and the 9 lords of the stone seat stood around the carved pale face that was only a carving now, and Scarnox the tally keeper kept the words, and Gornuk stood at Harry's back as he had stood there before, scarred hand between the boy's shoulders, the anchor. Scarnox spoke first into the fire in the old grinding tongue, and Griffook murmured the meaning at Harry's ear, low and fast. He calls the fire to witness. He tells it that a thing not born of it asks to be made kin to it. He tells it the law, that the fire may take a stranger into itself only 4 ways, and that 3 of them are closed to the living, and the 4th is this, that the stranger has given the fire back its memory, and so may be given the fire's memory in turn. A great hammer was brought, old beyond old, its head a black stone Harry's other sense could not hear at all, older than naming, older than the choir, a thing from before the first goblin name was ever struck. And Scarnox laid Harry's small hand on the haft of it, over the deep grooves worn by 10,000 years of grip, and the blind tally-keeper said in halting English, so that the boy himself would understand and not only the witnesses, Harry, son of James, of the House of Potter, of the people of wizards, the fire knows you. You came to it a stranger, and you gave it back 400 years of its own self, and a thing the fire owes, the fire pays, for that is the whole of what we are. Hear then what you are given and what you give. You are given the lore, the deep lore, the unwritten lore, the history we forge and do not speak, and the truth of how the nation is strong and how it is weak, withheld from your own kind for 900 years and now yours. You are given the craft, the smithing of intent, the warding of grain and oath, the warcraft of the hammerguard, taught to no human in 1,000 years, taught to you because you are no longer wholly a human to us, but a friend. You are given the protection, the long arm, and the long memory of the nation. To strike you is to strike us, to wrong you is to wrong us. Wherever you go in the world above or the world below, a friend of the forge is never alone and never without recourse, for the fire knows its own and will move mountains to reach you. And these you give in turn, your hand to the nation's quarrels, your silence to the nation's secrets, your truth to the nation's counsels, and your name to the nation's honor, so that as we will not suffer you to be wronged, you will not suffer the nation to be wronged, and our enemies are made your enemies in the deep stone and in the sun, for as long as the fire remembers you, which is forever, for the fire forgets nothing now because of you. And then Scarnox struck. He brought the black stone hammer down, not on Harry, but on the anvil at the forge's root, the cathedral-sized anvil where every true thing of the nation had been struck since before the city hung from the dark, and the blow rang out, one single enormous note, and to Harry's other sense the note went through the whole hanging city and through every blade and ring and lock and ward, and it carried in it, woven into it, struck into the very iron of the nation, a new name. His name. He felt it go into the work. He felt 10,000 goblin-forged things, a mile in every direction, receive it and remember it the way they remembered their makers. Harry, friend of the forge, kin to the fire, struck into the iron of a nation that forgot nothing anymore. He would never again touch goblin work anywhere in the world without feeling it know him. He would never again, as long as he lived, be a stranger to the deep stone. The boy who had lived 7 years in a cupboard, unwanted, unclaimed, unseen, stood on the black platform over the fire with his hand on a hammer older than naming, and felt an entire nation, struck into its very iron, claim him. He did not cry this time. He had decided beforehand not to, because he wanted to remember it clearly, and you cannot see a thing clearly through tears. So he stood very straight, with Gornuk's scarred hand between his shoulders, and he let the one beat of it move through him and be true and pass. And when Scarnox lifted the great hammer and the last note died into the singing city, Harry Potter said, in a clear small voice that carried to every corner of the Heartforge, "Thank you, I'll keep it." And around the black platform the lords of the Goblin nation struck their fists once against their chests, a single iron sound, which was the salute they gave only to their own. Barug came to him after the rite, which Harry had not expected, and said a hard thing in a hard voice, which Harry came to understand was the only way Barug said anything that mattered. "I argued for your death," the captain of the Hammer Guard said without preamble, twice, in open council. "I will not pretend I did not, for you were standing close enough to hear it through the doors, and a goblin who pretends is a goblin you cannot trust at your flank." His flat dark eyes held the boys. "I still think you a risk. A wizard is a wizard, and the sun does things to its children that the stone cannot undo, and in 10 years or 30 you may be a thing I would have been right to fear. I do not take back the fearing." He paused, and the haft of the great axe turned once in his hands. "But the right is struck, and the right holds, and a Hammerguard does not know a thing the fire has decided. So hear me, friend of the forge. I will guard you as I guard my own, because the nation has made you its own, and I will do it with my whole iron, and I will go on thinking you a risk the entire time, and you will find that this makes me a better guard than the ones who love you, not a worse one. A guard who fears the thing he guards never sleeps. Sleep easy. I will not." It was, Harry would learn, the highest pledge Barog had ever made to anyone, and he made it scowling, which was how Harry knew it was true. There was one thing more, and Gornuk gave it. The old warder drew it from his coat, a torque of dark goblin silver, sized for a child's throat, plain but for a single seam running through it where two metals had been forged into one. It sang to Harry's other sense before it touched him, not the choir of the city, but a single clear note meant for him alone, his own name woven into the metal, struck there during the rite while he had been listening to the hammer. "A leash, the first token," Gornuk said. "This is not a leash, this is the other thing." He opened the torque and set it about the boy's neck, and it closed itself with a sound like a key turning home, warm at once against the skin. "The gray disc told us where you were so we might watch you. This tells us where you are so we might reach you. They are not the same. A friend wears no leash, a friend wears a call." His scarred fingers rested a moment on the closed seam. "Grip it in your fist and want us, truly want us, and the nearest stone of the deep will know it, and the nation will move. Not soon, perhaps, the deep is far from the sun, and the road is long even for us, but it will move. You will never again be a child alone in the dark with no one coming. Someone is always coming now. Remember that on the nights you most need to." Harry put his hand over the warm metal at his throat and could not speak, and the old goblin let him not speak, and that was the one beat of it, and it passed. They let him walk the city before he went back up, and it was Gornuk who walked with him, and Harry learned what it meant to be known by 10,000 years of iron. He had walked the hung streets twice before, and both times the work had sung to him the way all goblin work sang, the great choir of makers. Now it did something else. Now as he passed, the work greeted him, every rail his hand brushed, every lintel he walked beneath, every lock and ward and forged thing within reach woke to his nearness and sounded his name back to him, soft, the way a dog lifts its head when its person comes into the room. The whole inverted city, a mile of it in every direction, knew the boy who walked its streets, because his name was struck into all of it now, and the fire forgot nothing. "It will do that everywhere," Gornuk said, watching the boy's face as a forged door handle hummed his name under his palm. "Any goblin work in the world, however far from the deep stone, a blade in a wizard's hall, a coin in a muggle's pocket that was struck in our mints before it wore away, the hinges of a door in a house you have never entered. It will know you. Most will be too faint and too far for you to hear, and none of it will speak to anyone but you. But it is there, Harry. You will never again stand in a made place and be a stranger to it. The nation gave you that. We did not mean it as comfort. We are not a comforting people, but I have watched your face for an hour, and I think it has become comfort anyway, and I find I am glad." The black eyes softened. "You spent 7 years certain you belonged nowhere. Now you belong to everywhere we ever touched. It is a large thing to give a small boy. We gave it anyway because you gave us larger, and because a debt, once we have decided to balance it, we balance to overflowing. That is the goblin way. We are terrible at moderation in the things that matter." Harry walked the singing, greeting city with his hand trailing the warm iron, the boy who had belonged nowhere now belonging to everywhere the fire had ever touched, and let the one beat of it move through him and pass, and said nothing because there was nothing large enough to say, and Gornuk, who understood that better than anyone, walked beside him in a silence that was its own kind of speech. Afterward, Ragnok found a reason to walk the boy back toward the cart alone. It was not sentiment. Harry understood that much already. Ragnar did nothing without a reason that could be weighed, and the reason became clear in the tunnel dark, away from the council, where the director stopped and turned his winter eyes on the boy. "You will go back up into the sun," Ragnar said. "Tonight and again, and in 4 years to the wizard school, and you will live among your own kind who do not know what you are and must not. This is not only for our secret, it is for you. A child known to be friend of the forge would be a prize, and the sunlit world is full of hands that take prizes, so you will be to them a small unimportant boy in a cupboard." His voice was flat and cold and entirely without cruelty, which made it land all the harder. "Can you do that? Can you carry the largest thing that has happened to you in 7 years and let them go on thinking you are nothing?" "It is a heavy silence for a child. I've been carrying the opposite my whole life," Harry said. "Letting them think I'm nothing when I knew I wasn't. This is just the same silence pointed a better way. I'm good at it. It's the thing I'm best at." He looked up at the director. "And there's a reason you walked me out here to ask, and it isn't whether I can keep a secret, because you already decided I could, or you wouldn't have struck my name into your iron. So what is it really?" Ragnar was quiet a moment. Then, for the first and very nearly the last time, the cold creature gave the boy something that was almost the truth and almost warmth and entirely his own. "Scarnox is afraid," the director said. "You broke the curse, and the curse was feeding something. A thing the old lore calls the pale sleeper, that the blight kept fed and quiet and far away in some lost hold of the deep dark for 400 years. You stopped the feeding 3 nights ago." He turned to go and spoke the rest over his shoulder into the dark. "A thing that has been fed for 400 years does not simply die when the food stops, child. It wakes hungry, and it will want to know what stopped its meal. So enjoy the sun, keep your silence, and learn the warcraft we have given you quickly, faster than is comfortable, faster than is kind, because I do not think the fire made you friend a single night too soon." He walked away into the dark, and behind him the new singing city rang on, and Harry stood alone in the tunnel with the grey leash token warm against his chest and the nation's name struck into his bones, and for the first time felt, under the enormous new gladness of being claimed, the cold small weight of what being claimed by a nation at war would cost. Chapter 3 End. Chapter 4 The Forge's lore. The lessons began the way Ragnar had promised, faster than was comfortable, faster than was kind. Harry's life split cleanly down the middle, and he learned to live in both halves without letting either show the seam. By day he was a small boy in Surrey who burned his bacon less than he used to, and got marked down by teachers who could not understand why his handwriting was a child's, and his answers were not. By night, when the house slept and the cupboard door could be left looking shut, he touched the torque to the brick and went down into the deep stone, and there he was something the sunlit world had no word for, and learned things the sunlit world had spent 1,000 years not being allowed to know. They did not go easy on him. That, more than anything, was how Harry knew they had meant the right. A nation that wished to pet a clever child would have given him sweets and stories. A nation that had made him kin and feared a waking enemy gave him a schedule that would have broken a grown wizard, and watched to see whether the friend they had forged could hold an edge. He held it. He had been holding worse for 7 years, and a hard master who wanted you to succeed was a luxury he had never once been offered. Barog had him first, and Barog did not pretend to be glad of it. "The director says you are to learn warcraft," the captain of the Hammerguard said on the first night, in the long low cavern where his soldiers drilled, the air ringing with the clash of practice iron and the stamp of armored feet. "The director did not say I had to enjoy teaching a wizard child who comes up to my chest plate and weighs less than my axe. So we will both suffer, and at the end of it you will know why goblins have held this stone against every wizard, dragon, and fool who has come for it since the world was young. Pick up that blade." The blade was a short goblin sword, and it was too heavy for Harry, and they both knew it. He picked it up anyway, and Barog set a young Hammerguard named Durnick against him, and Durnick disarmed him in under a second, and the watching soldiers laughed, and Barog did not. "Again," Barog said. Durnick disarmed him 11 times. On the 12th, Harry did not try to keep the blade. He let it go the instant Durnick's strike began, stepped inside the goblin's reach where the heavy practice axe could not be brought to bear, and put the flat of his free hand against Durnick's breastplate, over the place where Harry had spent the 11 previous bouts noticing. The goblin always shifted his weight onto his back foot before a blow. Durnick, off balance and reaching for a sword that was already on the floor, went over backward. The cavern went quiet. Harry stood over the fallen soldier, breathing hard, his hand still out, and looked up at Barog. "I can't beat him with the sword," Harry said. "He's stronger and faster, and he's done it for 50 years. So I stopped trying to win the fight you set up, because that fight's already lost before it starts. I watched instead. He leans back before every strike, all of them do. It's how you load an axe, and that half second he's leaning back, he can't move his feet. So I waited for the lean and took the feet." He lowered his hand. "I can't outfight a Hammerguard, but the fight isn't the sword. The fight's the thing underneath the sword, the weight and the feet in the half second, and that I can learn. That's just a system. Everything's a system if you watch it long enough." Barog looked at him for a long moment. Then the captain of the Hammerguard did something he had not done since the boy walked into the council cave. He smiled, a short, hard goblin smile with too many teeth in it, and he reached down and hauled Durnick to his feet, and he said to the watching soldiers, "Did you see it? The smallest, weakest thing in this cavern just put Durnick on his back because Durnick fought a child and the child fought a machine. This is the lesson. This is the only lesson. Strength is a thing your enemy has measured before he ever swings. Find the thing he has not measured." He turned to Harry. "You will never be strong, wizard child. You came to the fire too late and too small, and you will go up into the sun where they do not even teach the body to be hard. So you will be the other thing. You will be the thing that has watched and counted and found the half-second. Pick up the blade. We are not finished. We are barely begun." It was the most words Barog had ever said to him, and very nearly the warmest, and Harry, who had spent his whole life being the smallest and weakest thing in every room, picked up the blade again with something he had not expected to feel in the Hammerguard's cavern, which was joy. Barog tested him again a fortnight later, and this time it was not a duel but a problem. He brought Harry to the drill floor where a full file of the Hammerguard stood in the shield wall the goblins called the Tooth. 8 soldiers locked shoulder to shoulder behind a wall of overlapping iron, and he said, "This wall has held the deep stone against wizards and worse for 1,000 years. No single blade breaks it. The more you push, the harder it locks. 3 armies have died on a tooth like this one. You have until the torches burn down to tell me how you would break it. You may not touch the soldiers. You may only think." Harry walked the length of the wall twice, listening not to the soldiers but to the iron, to the 8 overlapping shields and the way their grain ran, the way each one leaned its weight on the next. He watched the soldiers breathe. He watched the small adjustments of their feet. And he saw, as he had seen with Durnick, that the strength of the thing was also the shape of its weakness, because a wall that locked harder the more you pushed it was a wall that had decided in advance exactly how it would answer pressure. "You can't break it by pushing," Harry said when he had walked it a third time. "It's built to win the pushing fight. Every soldier's leaning on the next one, so the harder I push anywhere, the more the whole wall leans together and the stronger it gets. That's the trick of it. It turns my strength into its strength." He stopped at the left end of the line. "But it only works if they're all leaning the same way. The whole wall is one thing because they're all braced against a push from the front, so I don't push from the front." He pointed at the leftmost soldier, the anchor of the line. "I pull from the side. If I could get one hook on the end shield and drag it outward instead of pushing it back, the lean that makes them strong against a front push would make them fall the other way. The second man's braced to hold the first man up, not to stop him being dragged out, and when the first goes the second's leaning on nothing, and it unzips down the line faster than they can rebrace. You don't break a tooth, you pull a tooth, from the side where the root is, where all the bracing points the wrong way." The shield wall was silent. Then Barog walked to the leftmost soldier, set his own great hand on the edge of the man's shield, and dragged it outward, and the tooth came apart exactly as Harry had said. The second man stumbling into the gap, the third, the whole locked wall unzipping into a tangle of off-balance soldiers in the space of 2 heartbeats, every one of them braced with perfect discipline against a danger that had come from the wrong direction entirely. "1,000 years," Barog said into the silence, "and the children of the Hammerguard are taught that the tooth cannot be broken, only outlasted. And a wizard child of 7 looks at it for the length of 3 walks and tells me it can be unzipped from the flank by a single hook, because the discipline that makes it strong makes it certain, and certainty is a door if you come at it sideways." He looked at the scattered soldiers and then at Harry, and the hard goblin smile came back. "We will not teach this to the young ones, it would ruin their confidence." But he set his hand on Harry's shoulder once briefly, which from Barog was nearly an embrace. "You think like a siege, wizard child. I have spent 200 years learning to break things, and you were born knowing the secret of it, which is that everything that is strong in a particular direction, and has turned its back on every other. Remember that. The enemy we are waking was the strongest working ever laid in our stone, and it too will have turned its back on something. Your task, when the day comes, will be to find which way it is not looking. Gornuk had him for warding, and warding was where the gift truly lived. The old warder took him down into the deep galleries where the great wards of the nation were anchored, vast lattices of intent woven through the living stone, holding the vaults shut and the enemies out and the 400 years of slow forgetting at bay, and he set Harry's hands on the cold rock and said, "Tell me what you feel." And Harry told him, and Gornuk grew very still, because the boy read the wards the way a master read them, and then passed where a master could read. "A ward is grain and oath," Gornuk said the second night, the 2 of them alone in a gallery a mile deep with the wards humming around them like a held breath. "The grain is how the stone wishes to lie. Every stone has a grain, a way it wants to crack, a way it wants to hold, and the warder who fights the grain builds a ward that fails in a century. The oath is the intent you forge into it, the thing you tell the stone to remember. Stay shut, stay strong, no friend from foe. A great ward is one where the grain and the oath agree, where you have told the stone to do the thing it already wished to do, so that it holds not because you forced it, but because it wants to. He laid his scarred hand beside Harry's on the rock. "This is the whole of it. This is 300 years of my life, and you heard it in 2 nights because you were born hearing grain the way some are born hearing music. I do not know why. I have stopped asking why. I have decided to be glad of it instead, which is not a thing old goblins do easily, and you should know it costs me." They built a ward together that month, a small thing, a true thing, a ward to seal a disused side gallery that no one had bothered with in 100 years. Gornuk laid the grain and Harry laid the oath, the two of them with their hands on the stone, and Harry felt the old goblin's intent and his own intent meet in the rock and agree, and the ward took and held and sang, and it was the first thing Harry had ever made in his life that would outlast him. "It will be here in 1,000 years, Gornuk said, his scarred fingers resting on the new-sung stone, "long after you and I are gone into the dark. A small good thing made by a goblin and a wizard together, holding a door no one needs held, for no reason but that we made it well. The black living eye found the boy. There has not been a thing in this world made by our two peoples together in 900 years, Harry Potter, not one. We forged separately and we died separately and we called it peace. You are the first crack in that. I am 300 years old and I did not think I would live to put my hand to such a crack." He was quiet a moment. "The fire scar on my knuckles, you have wondered about it. I will tell you once and not again. I held a failing ward shut with my bare hands for a night and a day, 100 years ago, while the smiths below worked to save the souls the failing would have spilled. The ward burned me to the bone, and I did not let go, because letting go meant losing 9 goblin lives, and I judged my hands a fair price for 9 lives, and I judged so still." He took his hand from the stone. "I tell you this so that you understand what a warder is. A warder is the one who does not let go. Remember it. There will be a night you need to." Harry looked at the white-burned knuckles and at the new-made ward singing in the dark and let the one beat of it move through him and pass, and did not say any of the things that were too large to say. And Gornuk, who understood not saying better than anyone Harry had ever known, let him keep his silence and was glad of it. Scarnox had him for lore, and lore was where the enemy first showed his face. The tally-keeper rolled along his endless shelves with the boy at the foot of the ladder, and he taught Harry the old script, the forge writing, the way the nation wrote its history not in books but in the things it made, so that to read goblin history you did not read at all. You listened, you put your hands on the old blades and the old rings and the old broken things, and heard the names and the deeds struck into them across 10,000 years. Harry took to it the way he took to everything that was a system underneath, and within weeks he could read a blade's making and unmaking the way a scholar reads a page, and Scarnox, 300 years blind, grew fond of the boy in the dry sideways manner of the very old. It was Scarnox who told him of Maelgr. "You broke a curse," the tally-keeper said one night, taking down a thing from the highest shelf, a thing wrapped in lead cloth that he handled the way one handles a live coal. "You should know whose curse it was. The stone seat has decided you may know, for you are friend and the enemy is yours now too." He unwrapped the lead cloth, and inside was a fragment of black iron no bigger than a coin, and to Harry's other sense it sang the same whole song as the dead coin, the same eaten silence, with the faintest echo of the pale carved face. "This is all that remains in our keeping of the thing he made. Touch it if you dare and listen, and I will tell you the rest." Harry touched it and listened, and behind the eaten silence he heard, very faint, very old, a single cold voice that had been clever and patient and entirely without warmth, and Scarnox told him the story while he listened, so that the words and the iron voice wove together into something Harry would never forget. "In the years when the White House was young," Scarnox said, "there came to the deep stone a wizard. He was not the first wizard to want what we had. They have always wanted it, the undying edge, the work that remembers, the metal that keeps its oath when their own spells fail and fade. But he wanted it more than any before or since, and for a reason worse than greed. He wanted to live forever, and he had learned in his long study that wizard magic could not give him this, that every road his own kind had found to immortality led through horror and ended in ruin. So he came to us. He had reasoned that if a goblin blade could remember its maker for 10,000 years, then a goblin forge, rightly bound, might be made to remember a man, to hold his soul the way it held a name, to keep him, unfading, undying, struck into iron that forgot nothing. The dry voice fell. We refused him. Of course we refused him. To bind a living soul into the fire is the one working forbidden above all others, for it makes of a person a thing, and a thing that was once a person hungers in ways no honest thing should. We drove him out. His name was Maelgr, and the wizards of his own age called him Maelgr the Pale, for the color the long study had left him, and we came to call him the Sun Thief for what he had tried to steal from the fire. And he came back, Harry said. He could hear it in the iron, the cold, patient turning over of a mind that did not forgive. "He came back," whispered Scarnox, "not openly, not with armies. He was cleverer than armies. He laid the blight, the curse you broke, into the root of our heart forge in secret over years, and we did not understand for a century what was happening to us. And the blight was 2 things at once, child, which is why no smith could break it, for they never understood it was 2 things. It was revenge. It ate our craft, our memory, our soul, slow and patient, to unmake the nation that had refused him. And it was theft. Every thimbleful of craft sole it ate, it did not destroy. It carried away. Down some hidden road to some lost place to feed the one working we had refused to do for him. For if we would not bind his soul into our fire, he would steal the binding, a little at a time, for 400 years, and make of some forgotten hold his own dark forge, and keep himself unfading, undying on the stolen soul of the nation that drove him out. The tally keeper wrapped the black iron back in its lead cloth, his blind face grave. This is the thing I fear, Harry, you broke the blight. You stopped the theft, and somewhere in the deep dark there is a forge that has fed on us for 400 years and has, 3 months ago, gone hungry for the first time. A thing kept alive by stolen soul does not die when the soul stops coming. It wakes and it looks for more, and it remembers exactly who took its meal away. Harry was quiet for a long moment, the cold iron voice still echoing in the back of his hearing. Then I didn't finish it, he said, breaking the curse. I thought I finished it. He looked up at the blind old goblin. I just cut the supply line. The thing it was feeding is still there, and now it's awake and hungry, and it knows the supply got cut on purpose. He squared his shoulders, and there was no fear in it, only the flat tactical reckoning that had become the truest thing about him. So it's not over, it's the opposite of over. I started a war by stopping a robbery. He met Scarnox's white eyes. Then I'd better learn fast, teach me the rest, all of it. Teach me how he thinks, because I broke the first thing he made. And to break the maker, I'm going to have to think like him without becoming him, and I'd rather learn the difference from you than find it out the hard way. Scarnox the tally keeper, 300 years old, looked at the 7-year-old human child who had just understood, unprompted, the exact shape of the danger that had taken the old goblin's people a century to see, and he made the dry rustling sound that was his laugh, and under it for the first time was something that was almost fear and almost pride and entirely beyond his long ability to price. Yes, he whispered. Yes, I think I had better. Harry forged his first piece that season, and it was small, and it was his. Scarnox guided his hands, and Gornuk lent the grain, and Barog, grudging, taught him the temper. But the oath in it was Harry's own, and the thing he made was a knife, a short, plain, honest knife, no longer than his own hand, with a single line of gray running through the blade where he had folded his intent into the steel. It would never be a great weapon. He was 7 and learning, and the blade showed it. But it was true, and it sang his name, and when it was done and quenched and cool, Harry held it and felt it know him, the way all goblin work knew him now, but more, for this one he had made, and it remembered being made, and it remembered being made by him. It will grow with you, Gornuk said, turning the little blade in his scarred fingers. That is the way of a first true piece. You made it green, and it will temper as you temper, and in 20 years it will be a thing worth fearing, because it will be exactly as true as you have become. Keep it close, keep it secret, and do not draw it in the sun unless you mean to use it, for goblin steel in a wizard's hand will raise questions you are not yet ready to answer. He returned the knife. What will you call it? A true blade is given a name by its maker, and the name is the last of the oath. Harry looked at the gray line running through the steel, the line that was his own folded intent, and he thought of the thing the curse had tried to do to him on the 9th night, the color going out of the spider morning, the hole it had left. Remember, he said. I'll call it remember, because that's the whole thing, isn't it? That's the whole war. He makes things forget, and we make things that remember, and the knife is on our side. He sheathed it in the small leather sheath Barog had grudgingly cut for him. Remember. So I don't ever, so none of us ever do again. And the 3 old goblins, the warrior and the warder and the keeper of the lore, looked at the boy and his small named blade and said nothing, because there was nothing to add. He tried the warcraft in the sun once to see if it carried, and found that it did. Dudley's gang had a game that autumn called Harry Hunting, and it worked the way the Rustwites would later work and the Tooth had worked on the drill floor, by mass, by certainty, by everyone pushing the same direction at once. For 7 years Harry had played his part in it, which was to run and be caught, because that was the role the game was built to give him. Now he watched it the way Barog had taught him to watch a shield wall, and he saw that the gang's strength was also its shape. 5 boys who only knew how to chase a thing that fled, braced entirely for a target running away from them. Every one of them turned the wrong way for a target that did the one thing the game had never once seen, which was to stop and turn and walk straight at them. So the next time they came he stopped and turned and walked at Dudley and said quite calmly, a true thing he had worked out in advance, that he knew where Dudley hid the sweets Aunt Petunia thought she'd thrown out, and that he had never told and never would, but that a boy who knew a thing like that was not a boy you wanted to make run, because running boys think and thinking boys remember, and Dudley should consider whether Harry Hunting was worth the small risk of Harry deciding to stop being quiet. He did not raise his voice. He had learned from the curse that you do not flinch and you do not shout. You say the true thing flat and let it land. Dudley's gang, braced to chase, had no formation for a small boy walking toward them talking calmly about leverage, and the game came apart from the flank, exactly as the Tooth had, and was never quite played again. Harry walked home unhurried, and thought that Barog would have approved, and was right. The smithing changed how Harry saw the sunlit world, which surprised him, because he had not expected the deep stone to follow him up into the light. He he began to hear it everywhere. A schoolteacher's wedding ring sang a thin true note of a thing made with meaning. The iron railings outside the school sang nothing at all, mass-stamped, meant by no one. And once, in a junk shop window he passed on the long walk home, a battered old hand-forged trowel sang so clear and true that Harry stood on the pavement for a full minute listening to a dead blacksmith's care still living in the steel, a century after the hand that made it was gone. He had thought before the deep stone that the world was Privet Drive, flat, gray, meant by no one, a place things merely happened in. Now he walked through it hearing which things had been loved into being and which had only been produced, and the world was not flat anymore. It was full of the ghosts of everyone who had ever meant something by their work, singing quietly under the noise, and Harry, who had spent 7 years certain he was alone, found he was not quite, not even in the sun, so long as he could hear. "It does not leave you," Gornuk said when Harry told him. "The hearing, it is not a tool you put down. Once you know that the work remembers, you cannot walk through a made world and forget it, and you will spend the rest of your life as one of the very few creatures who knows that nothing well-made is ever truly alone, because the meaning stays in it, singing for whoever has the ears." The black eye found him. "It is a lonely gift and a companion one at once. You will understand that better when you are older, for now it is enough that you have stopped thinking the world is Privet Drive. It never was. It was only that no one had taught you to hear it. Harry was a tactician, and a tactician does not learn a nation's warcraft and then go home and remain a powerless child in a cupboard. He applied it. Quietly, methodically, over that autumn, he turned the Goblin's systems on his own life the way he turned them on everything. He asked Griffook, who was always glad to trade knowledge for favor, how a Goblin account was opened, and what name it might be opened under, and whether a friend of the forge might hold gold that no wizard ministry could see or touch or tax or take. He learned that he might. He learned a great deal about how the sunlit world's money moved, and how the goblins stood athwart all of it like a toll gate, and how a clever creature with goblin friends and goblin lore might in time become a thing no Dursley and no ministry could ever again make powerless. He did not become rich that autumn. He was 7. But he laid the foundations of never being powerless again the way he laid the oath in the knife, carefully, truly, a line of gray folded into the steel of his future, and the goblins watching understood what he was doing and approved, because a friend who made himself strong was a friend worth having, and a creature who would never again be at anyone's mercy was a creature who could be trusted to keep his oaths from strength rather than fear. "You are building yourself a vault," Griffook observed, the night Harry signed the papers that gave him, at 7, a name in the deep stone that the sunlit world would never find. "Not of gold, of standing, of things they cannot take. I have watched wizards 20 times your age fail to understand what you understood at 7, that the gold is not the point, that the gold is only the shadow of the real thing, which is to be a creature no one can compel." His sharp young face was unreadable. "You frighten me a little, Harry Potter. I think you will frighten a great many people in time. I am glad to be on your side of it." "So am I," said Harry, and meant it, and they shook on it, goblin fashion, palm to wrist, the way you sealed a thing you intended to keep. Far away in the deep dark, in a hold no living goblin had walked in 400 years, a forge that had burned without fuel since before the White House was built began very slowly to go cold. There was no one to see it. The hold was sealed and lost and forgotten, its name struck from the tallies in the century when the blight first came, and the dark there was older and deeper than any dark in the hung city. But if there had been someone to see, they would have seen the red light at the forge's heart dim and gutter as the river of stolen soul that had fed it for 400 years ran dry at last, 3 months too late to matter. And they would have seen in the dimming light a hand move. It was a pale hand, and it had not moved in 4 centuries, and it moved now slowly, the way a thing moves that has forgotten it can, fingers uncurling one by one from a fist they had been clenched in since before any goblin now living was struck from the fire. The hand belonged to a shape seated at the cold forge, a long, pale, narrow shape with a high brow and hollow cheeks and eyes that had been shut so long the lids had nearly forgotten how to open, and when at last they did open in the failing dark, they were the color of nothing at all. The shape did not breathe, for it had not breathed in 400 years and did not need to. It sat in the dying light of its stolen forge and felt, for the first time in 4 centuries, the cold of true hunger, the meal cut off, the river run dry, and somewhere under the hunger, slow and patient and entirely without warmth, it felt the affront of it, the impossibility of it, that something had reached into the root of its patient working and stopped it. The pale lips moved. They made no sound, for there was no one to hear, but if there had been, the word they shaped would have frozen the hearer's blood, for it was not a curse and not a cry but a question, asked by a mind that had not lost 1 degree of its terrible cleverness in 400 years of dreaming. Who? And the pale sleeper that the lore called Maelger, that the goblins called the sun thief, woke fully in the dark of his lost hold, and began with the unhurried patience of a creature that has all the time there is to find out. The blight, loosed from its anchor, went out across the deep places of the earth, and where it went, the old dead stirred and were robbed a second time. There are battlefields under the world that no living thing has walked in 3,000 years, galleries where goblin host met goblin host in the wars before the wars that history remembers, where the slain were left in their iron because the living had no strength left to carry them home. The craft soul of those fallen had soaked into the stone over the slow millennia, faint as the smell of rain long after the rain, a thin gold residue of 10,000 makers who had meant something by their blades before they died on them. For 4,000 years it had lain there undisturbed, a quiet richness in the dark. The blight found it. The wandering hunger went into the old battlefields and drank the gold out of the stone, the last thin echo of the ancient dead, and carried it down the lost roads to the cold forge where its maker waited, and the ancient slain who had been merely dead were made nothing, their final residue eaten, their long quiet richness gone out of the rock as though they had never fought, never fallen, never meant a thing by the iron they died on. It was a robbery committed against the unburied, a theft from corpses 4,000 years cold, and there was no one to see it and no one to stop it, only the wandering hunger moving patient through the deep dark, gathering the last of the ancient dead to keep one dead man undying a little longer. And in his cold forge far down, Melgar felt the thin gold come home and did not fade quite, and turned his nothing-colored eyes toward the upper dark where a child he had not yet met went on learning to hear the song he had spent 400 years devouring, and he waited and he gathered and he was patient because patience was the one craft he had perfected, and he had all the time there was. The outpost was called Carnduer, and it had stood watch on the edge of the deep dark for 1,000 years, and when the relief patrol reached it that midwinter it was empty, not abandoned, empty. The fires were cold, but the tables were set, the watch horns hung in their places, a game of stones sat half-finished on a bench, the pieces fallen where a hand had been about to move them. The 40 goblins of the Carnduer garrison were simply gone, every one with no sign of struggle, no blood, no breach in the wards still held, still sang, still knew friend from foe, and had let nothing through that did not belong. It was Harry they sent for in the end because the patrol captain's report reached Gornuk, and Gornuk had read one line of it twice and gone grey, and brought the boy down through the deep galleries to the silent outpost himself, because there was one thing in the report that only the friend of the forge could read. The blades, every blade in Carnduer, the garrison's swords, the watch spears, the smith's tools, the very nails in the doors had rusted, not slowly. All at once in a single night, 400 years of corrosion crammed into a few hours, every edge gone to red powder, every true note gone silent, every name eaten clean out of the steel. Harry walked through the empty outpost with the little knife remember warm against his hip and his other sense open, and he listened to 40 goblins' worth of weapons that had forgotten, all at once, that they had ever been made. He knelt by the half-finished game of stones where a sword lay rusted to a red shadow on the floor beside a fallen player's bench, and he put his hand over the ruined steel and listened, and his blood went cold in a way the cupboard had never managed. "It's the blight," he said. His voice was very quiet in the silent hall. The same signature, the same eaten silence. He did this. He looked up at Gornuk, and his green eyes were wide and certain and afraid. "But it's not in the root anymore. It's not in the forge, it's loose, it moved. The blight used to sit in one place and eat slowly, but this came here and one night ate everything and then left because there's none of it here now, it's gone, it took what it wanted and moved on." He stood, his hands still cold from the dead steel. "It's not a curse in the ground anymore, Gornuk, it's hunting. It came here looking for something and didn't find it and ate the outpost out of spite and took the garrison for I don't know what for, but it took them, and it's still out there, moving, looking." He met the old goblin's eye. "He's awake, the sun thief, he's awake and he's hungry and he's not waiting in his lost hold for us to come to him. He's already coming, and the first thing he did when he woke was send the thing I broke out into the dark to find me." Gornuk stood in the empty outpost, among the rusted blades and the cold-set tables and the half-finished game no one would ever finish, and the old warder's scarred hands tightened on his black iron cane, and for the first time since Harry had known him, the master warder of the deep stone looked, not afraid exactly, but very old and very tired and like a creature who had hoped to die before this particular night came. "Then the war has begun," Gornuk said, "and it has begun on our ground with our dead, and it has begun by coming for you." He turned toward the deep galleries, toward the hung city, toward the stone seat that would have to be told. "Come, friend of the forge, the nation must wake, and you and I must go and tell 9 frightened lords that the thing the tally-keeper feared has happened, and that it is hunting a child, and that the child is ours." Chapter 4 end. Chapter 5 The wizarding world stirs in a circular office at the top of a tower in Scotland. A small silver instrument that had spun quietly on a spindle-legged table for 7 years began, one winter morning, to behave oddly. Albus Dumbledore noticed it over his porridge. The instrument was one of a dozen that watched Harry Potter, watched, more precisely, the blood ward at Privet Drive that kept the boy safe, and the slow accumulation of the boy's own magic, the loose untaught surges that every magical child gives off before the wand and the wending of Hogwarts teach them to fold it neatly away. For 7 years the instrument had told the same dull story. The ward held, the boy lived, the magic gathered as a child's magic gathers, in fits and floods, shapeless and bright. That morning the instrument told a different story, and Dumbledore set down his spoon to listen to it. The boy's magic was still gathering, but it had stopped being shapeless. The little silver arm that traced the quality of it on a slow-turning drum had been drawing, for 7 years, the jagged scribble of untaught power. Now it drew something else, something ordered, something worked, loops and lattices and clean repeating figures, the unmistakable signature of magic that was being trained, not surging. Practicing, as though somewhere in the gaps the instruments did not watch, a 7-year-old boy in a muggle house with no wand and no teacher and no books was learning to use his magic the way a smith learns to use a hammer. This was, very simply, impossible. And Dumbledore had spent a long life learning that the impossible was merely the true thing he had not yet found the frame for. He examined the instrument for an hour. He examined its 11 brothers. The ward at Privet Drive held, that was certain, that was bedrock. The boy was safe within his mother's blood. The boy was alive and well. The boy was, by every measure the instruments could take, exactly where he should be and exactly as protected as he should be. And the boy's magic was being shaped by a hand the instruments could not see, in a place the instruments did not reach, by a method Albus Dumbledore, who knew more of magic than nearly any living wizard, could not begin to name. He wrote that afternoon to Arabella Figg. Her answer came 3 days later, and it troubled him more than the instrument had. The boy was often not about, Mrs. Figg reported in her careful squib's hand. He went off on his own, more than a child his age should, and came back tired but unharmed, and would not say where he had been, and the Dursleys, who ought to have minded, did not seem to notice he had gone. She had followed him once toward the town and lost him near the station in a way she could not account for, as though he had simply stopped being somewhere she could see. She did not like it. She did not understand it. She thought Professor Dumbledore should know. Dumbledore sat with the letter a long time as the winter light went down the tower windows. He was an intelligent man, the most intelligent in the room of nearly any room he entered, and he reasoned from what he knew, which was the wizarding world, its schools, its dark lords, its prophecies, its long quarrels written in the sky over Britain. He reasoned that the boy's burgeoning power was the Potter inheritance coming early, that a child of such parents, marked by such a night, might well begin to shape his own magic untaught, a prodigy ahead of his years. He reasoned that the wanderings were a lonely boy's escape from an unhappy house, and resolved to ensure the boy's eventual welcome at Hogwarts was warm enough to heal it. He reasoned, in short, in every direction but the right one, because the right one lay a mile beneath the streets of London in a place no wizard had been made kin to in 900 years, and there was nothing in all of Albus Dumbledore's vast and subtle knowledge that would ever have led him to look down. He looked as he always looked, at the sky, at the gathering shape of the war he believed was coming. The Dark Lord he believed was not truly gone, the destiny he had written for the boy and meant, in his own time and his own way, to spring upon him. And while he looked up, the alliance that would change everything went on forming in the deep dark beneath his feet, unwatched, unsuspected, and entirely beyond the reach of his careful silver instruments. Curious, the old wizard said to the empty office, and set the matter aside for a quieter day, when the more pressing business of the sky allowed. He would not consider it again for a long time. By the time he did, it would be far, far too late to do anything but marvel. The ministry came at it from a different angle and from a colder mind. Her name was Hesper Quill, and she was an undersecretary in the Department for the Regulation and Control of Magical Creatures, which was the politest name the wizarding world had yet found for the office that watched the goblins. She was young for the post and meant to be older in it. She was ambitious in the patient, bloodless way of a woman who has decided that power is the only thing in the world worth wanting, and that everyone who pretends otherwise is either a fool or a competitor. She wore gray and she smiled with her mouth, and she had spent 4 years building quietly in a locked cabinet in a basement office, the most complete catalogue of goblin weakness that any wizard had assembled in a century. It was a hobby at first. The goblins were arrogant and the ministry was nervous of them, and Hesper Quill had reasoned that a woman who understood exactly where the goblins were soft would one day be a woman the ministry could not do without, so she had collected. Treaty disputes, vault audits, the small, humiliating concessions the goblins had been forced to over the centuries, and threaded through all of it, the thing she was proudest of having noticed, because no one else had, that goblin work was decaying. She had the records. A ministry cursebreaker decades back, sent down on a treaty audit, had noted in passing that certain goblin enchantments seemed to be softening with age in a manner inconsistent with goblin craftsmanship. Another, years later, the same. A vault that should have been impregnable had yielded to a clumsy spell. A goblin blade, confiscated in a smuggling case, had been found to be curiously dull at the binding level, as though the maker's intent had faded. One note here, a decade, another there. Nothing anyone would connect unless they were the sort of patient, bloodless collector who connected things for a living. Hesper Quill had connected them. She had concluded in the privacy of her locked cabinet that the goblins were dying slowly, secretly, at the level of their craft, the one thing that made them more than a bank, and that whoever held the proof of it would hold the goblins themselves, because a people whose strength is failing will pay any price to keep the failing secret. And then, this winter, the decay had stopped. She found it the way she found everything, in the dry margins of an audit. A routine inspection of confiscated goblin work in the ministry's own evidence vaults, blades and rings catalogued years ago, each one noted as dulling, softening, fading, had been recatalogued by a junior clerk who reported, with a clerk's incuriosity, that the items appeared to have been restored to full enchantment, query error in original assessment. Hesper Quill read the clerk's note 4 times. The items had not been touched. They had sat in a sealed ministry vault for years. And in a single season, every one of them had gone from fading to whole, as though the rot eating them had simply all at once been switched off. She knew goblin work could not heal itself. She knew it better than any wizard alive. And so she knew that something had happened under Gringotts this winter of a magnitude she could not imagine, something that had reached into every piece of goblin work in Britain at once and given it back its soul. She requested an audit of Gringotts. The goblins refused, citing the treaty. She requested it again with a magistrate's seal. The goblins produced a clause she had not known existed, 400 years old, and refused again with perfect courtesy and a contempt so cold it warmed her, because contempt that careful was a thing protecting something enormous. She did not need the audit in the end. The refusal told her everything the audit would have. The goblins were hiding the most important thing that had happened to them in 4 centuries, and Hesper Quill, in her gray suit in her basement office, smiled with her mouth and began, patiently, bloodlessly, to dig. She did not stop at the refusal. Hesper Quill never stopped at a refusal. A refusal was only a closed door, and a closed door told you exactly where the valuable room was. She went instead to the men who had written the old audit notes, the retired curse-breakers, the pensioned-off inspectors, the men who had gone down into Gringotts over the decades and come back up with a sentence or two in the margins about goblin work that was softening with age. Most were dead, 2 were not. She found the first in a cottage in Kent, a deaf old wizard who remembered nothing but his garden. She found the second in a wizarding rest home outside Bath, and he was sharper and frightened, and when she said the words goblin enchantment and fading, his hands shook around his tea. They made us swear, the old curse-breaker said. Every one of us, before we went down and after we came up. Bound oaths, the goblin kind, the kind that take your tongue if you break them. I can't tell you what I saw, I can't. The oath holds even now, even this far from the gold. He looked at her with rheumy, knowing eyes. But I'll tell you the one thing the oath doesn't cover, because it's a thing about me, and not about them. I went down there a young man, certain the goblins were just clever bankers with a high opinion of themselves. I came up understanding that we have been living, all of us, all the wizarding world, on the upper floor of a house whose foundations we have never seen and never will, and that the goblins like it that way, and that they are right to, because if we ever saw the foundations we would do something stupid, the way our kind always does. He set down his shaking tea. Whatever you think you've found under Gringotts, leave it, you won't get it. Better wizards than you have gone down there hunting the goblins' secret and come back with nothing but an oath that holds till they die. The goblins have been keeping secrets since before we had a word for secret. You're a clever girl, be clever enough to stop. Hesper Quill thanked him and did not stop, because being told to stop by a frightened old man was, to a mind like hers, indistinguishable from being told she was close. But she left the rest home with one new thing lodged in her, under the ambition where she did not like to look, the old man's certainty that there was a whole house beneath the one she lived in, and that she would die without ever seeing it. She had built her career on the conviction that everything could be known by a patient enough mind. The old curse-breaker had said plainly that some things could not, and that the goblins were the keepers of those things, and that no amount of patience would ever be enough. She went back to her locked cabinet in her gray suit and dug harder, and told herself the splinter under her ambition was excitement, and knew, in the part of herself she did not consult, that it was something more like fear. Harry, who did not know any of this, was nearly caught the following week, and it taught him how thin the wall between his 2 lives truly was. It happened on the ordinary edge of things, not in the deep stone, where the danger was vast and clear, but in the sunlit gap between the crooked alley and the brick wall and the threshold he slipped through to go down. He had grown careless, a little, in the way of a child who has done a secret thing safely 100 times. He came up out of the alley one gray afternoon, the torque cold under his collar and the knife, remember, warm at his hip, and stepped back through the threshold into the Muggle street, and a woman in gray was standing across the road, watching the place where he appeared. She should not have been able to see him appear. The threshold hid its comings and goings, that was its whole purpose. But Hesper Quill had spent 4 years studying the seams of the goblin world, and she had set herself that week to watch the one entrance to Diagon Alley a child might use. On a hunch she could not have justified to her superiors and did not need to, and she saw, across the gray street, a small boy step out of a piece of wall that had no business holding a boy and stop and meet her eyes. For one cold instant they looked at each other, the ambitious undersecretary and the 7-year-old friend of the forge, and Harry understood with the flat certainty that had never once failed him, that the woman in gray was the most dangerous thing he had met in the sunlit world, because she was patient and she was clever and she was looking, which no one in the sunlit world ever did. He did the only thing he could. He used the gift Gornuk had given him. The old warder had pressed it on him weeks before, a token like the first but turned outward, a misdirection ward, a small worked thing that made the eye that watched you slide off the way the eye slid off the pub. For the day someone in the sun looks too closely, Gornuk had said, it will not make you invisible. It will make you forgettable, which is better, for the invisible is noticed by its absence and the forgettable is not noticed at all. Grip it and wish to be unremarkable and be calm, for the ward feeds on calm and fails on fear. Harry gripped it now across the gray street from the gray woman, and he was not calm. His heart was going like Dernick's drum, but he had learned on the 9th night before the curse how to decide a thing beforehand and do it when the fear came, and so he decided to be calm and was, and the ward took. He watched it work. He watched the woman's sharp gray gaze, fixed on him with such terrible attention, slide not away exactly, but down, as though her mind had quietly reclassified the boy from anomaly to nothing, from the thing I am hunting to a child, only a child, why am I looking at a child? Her brow furrowed. Her eyes moved past him, came back, slid off again. And Harry, forgettable, unremarkable, a child, only a child, turned and walked away up the gray street at an ordinary pace, not fast, never fast, and did not look back, and was gone around a corner before Hesper Quill could remember why she had thought, a moment ago, that the corner mattered. She stood in the gray street for a long time afterward, certain she had seen something and unable to say what, and the not knowing lodged in her like a splinter, and she went back to her basement and her locked cabinet and dug harder, because a thing that could make her forget it was a thing worth more than all her catalogue, and Hesper Quill had decided long ago that she would have the things that were worth the most. Harry told Gornuk that night, and Gornuk listened and did not scold him, which was how Harry knew it was serious. You used the ward well, the old warder said. You decided to be calm, and you were, and that is a thing grown wizards fail at. But mark me, friend of the forge, the ward will not hold against that one twice. She is the kind that learns. She forgot you today, but she will remember that she forgot, and she will come at the place you forgot her from again and again until she finds the seam. He turned the misdirection token in his scarred fingers. We will change your road. You will not use that threshold again. And the stone seat will be told that a clever gray woman of the ministry is digging at the wall, because the stone seat must always know where the wall is being dug. He looked at the boy. You are learning the truest lesson of the two life, Harry, and learning it young. It is not the great enemies that undo you. The great enemy in the deep dark we will face with the whole nation at our backs. It is the small clever ones in the sun, the patient diggers, the ones who only want to know. They are the ones who pull the whole secret out by a single loose thread, and they do it so quietly you never feel the thread go. He pocketed the token. Be more careful than you think you need to be, always. The day you feel safe in the sun is the day she has you. They changed his road that week, and the changing taught Harry that the goblins thought about the sun more carefully than the sun ever thought about them. Gornuk did not simply name a new door. He laid out on the lore hall floor a map of London that no wizard ministry possessed, every threshold, every seam, every old goblin cut way between the deep stone and the upper air, drawn from 1,000 years of watching the city grow over them. And he made Harry learn 3 roads, not one, and a rule for choosing between them that changed with the day and the hour, so that no watcher in the sun, however patient, could ever learn the pattern of the boys coming and going, because there was no pattern. Only a system the watcher could not see the rule of. The gray woman will set herself at one door and wait, the old warder said. So you will never use one door. She will watch the morning, so you will come at no fixed hour. She is patient, and patience defeats a habit, so you will have no habit. You will have a rule instead, and a rule that changes is a thing patience cannot wear down, for there is nothing for it to wear against. He rolled the map closed. This is how we have lived under their feet for 1,000 years, Harry, not by hiding, by being unpredictable in a way that looks from above like not being there at all. Learn it. It will keep you alive in the sun long after the deep stone cannot reach you. Far away in the deep dark, Melgar was learning too, and Melgar learned the way a glacier moves slowly and without anything in the world able to stop it. He had woken hungry, and the first thing the hunger had done was teach him the shape of his own diminishment. 400 years of stolen soul had kept him not merely alive but strong, a thing growing in the dark, accruing power on the slow river of the nation's craft. The river had stopped. And so for the first time in 4 centuries, Melgar the Pale could feel the floor of himself. The place where the stolen strength ran out and the true cost of 400 undying years began, and it frightened him. in the cold, bloodless way that fear came to a thing that had stopped being a man, because it meant that without more soul he would, in time, in a century or two, at last begin to fade. He would not fade. He had not spent 400 years stealing immortality to fade now at the threshold because some unknown hand had turned off his river. So he did the patient, terrible thing. He went looking for the soul wherever it had been spilled. The blight he had laid was not gone, it was only loosed. For 4 centuries it had sat in the heart-forge and eaten slow. Now, cut from its anchor, it had become a wandering hunger, a wound walking, and it remembered its maker. Melgar called it back to himself and learned to send it out. And where the old goblin wars had spilled craft soul into the ground, old battlefields, lost holds, forgotten dead, 4,000 years of goblin iron rusting in the deep places of the earth, the blight went and gathered and brought the thin stolen soul back to the cold forge, and the forge warmed a little, and Melgar did not fade quite, and bought himself time to do the thing that mattered, which was to learn who had stopped his river. It took him 3 months to learn it, and when he did not believe it, and then he believed it, and then he wanted it. A child, a wizard child of the soft sunlit kind, 7 years out of the cradle, had walked into the root of the heartforge and unsaid the false name at the heart of the blight, had reached into the most careful working Melgar had laid in 400 years and simply spoken the truth to it until it stopped. No smith had done it, no curse breaker had done it. He had built the blight to survive every craft, because craft was what he understood, craft was what he had stolen, craft was the whole war between himself and the nation that drove him out. And a child who did not fight with craft at all, who fought with listening, with naming, with a gift Melgar had never accounted for because it had not existed in any wizard he had known in his long life, had walked in and turned it off. Melgar sat at his cold forge in the lost dark and considered the child, and the considering was the most dangerous thing that had happened to Harry Potter since the night his parents died. For Melgar did not want the child dead. A dead child was a wasted child. The child carried a gift Melgar had never possessed and could not forge, the gift of unnaming, of reaching into the deepest binding and speaking the halting truth that no craft could resist. With that gift in his hand, Melgar reasoned, in the cold, patient cathedral of his 400-year mind, he would not need to steal soul a thimbleful at a time from old battlefields. He could reach into the heartforge itself, into the 10,000 true names of the living nation, and unname them, unmake the goblin's own souls at the root, and drink the whole nation down at once, every living craft soul in the deep stone, enough to keep him undying not for centuries but forever, enough to make of the sun thief at last the god he had set out 400 years ago to become. He needed only the child, the living key. The small reaching hand that could open any name turned with patience and with art against the very nation that had made it friend. So Melgar did not send a curse to kill the boy. He sent a thing to find him. He made the messenger with care, because a thing worth sending is a thing worth making well, and Melgar had not lost, in 400 years of theft, the patience of a true craftsman. He chose Vargash from among his preserved dead, the way a smith chooses a billet for the grain of him, for what he had been. Vargash had been a goblin smith of rare gift, taken in the cold years, and his hands still remembered, even hollowed, even 4 centuries dead, the shape of good work. Melgar poured himself into the dead smith slowly, a thread of cold wool threaded down through the ruined craft soul, and he did not hollow Vargash all at once, because he wanted the smith's own voice left in him, frayed and thin, to carry the message in a register the goblins would feel in their teeth, their own lost son, speaking their doom in a voice they had wept for. It was cruelty, but it was not idle cruelty. Melgar was never idle. It was design. A message delivered in a stranger's voice is argued with. A message delivered in the voice of your own honored dead goes in under the argument, into the old grief, where it cannot be reasoned away. He worked at it for a fortnight in the cold forge, shaping the dead smith into a key that would open the goblin's resolve from the inside, and when it was done he set in it the last and cleverest thing, which was the offer to the child, not a threat, for threats harden the soft, but a recognition. We are the same, you and I, both unmade by the world, both breakers. He did not believe it would turn the child. He had stopped believing in easy victories somewhere in his 2nd century. But he believed it would lodge, the way the old curse-breaker's certainty had lodged in Hesper Quill, the way all true things lodge whether or not they're welcome, and a child with a true thing lodged in him is a child who has begun, however slightly, to wonder, and Melgar the Pale had 400 years of patience to wait for a wondering child to wonder his way down into the dark. He sent the messenger up through the deep roads on the new will he had gathered from the ancient dead, and he sat back at his cold forge to wait for the answer, and he found to his faint surprise that he was something he had not been in 400 years. He was curious. It came to the edge of the default on the deepest night of midwinter, and the wards felt it and did not know what it was, and that was the horror of it. Gornuk was the first to the breach, because the failing ward that screamed in the deep gallery was one he himself had set, and a warder feels his own work fail the way a man feels his own bone break. He came down the dark with Harry at his heels, for the boy had been below that night in the lore hall with Scarnox and would not be sent up while the nation went to its walls, and a file of the hammer guard behind, Barrog at their head with tooth in his hands, and they found the thing standing in the breach in the ward light, and Gornuk stopped so suddenly that Harry ran into him. It had been a goblin. That was the thing Harry understood first with his other sense before his eyes could make peace with what they saw. The shape in the breach had the bones of a goblin, the height in the hands and the long clever fingers, but it had been remade, the craft soul eaten out of it and something else poured in, so that to Harry's hearing it sang the whole song of the blight, and woven through the whole, the single cold patient voice he had heard in the black iron fragment, the voice of the sun thief, threaded into the thing like a hand inside a glove. Its eyes were the color of nothing. Its skin was the pale of 400 years without sun. And when it spoke in a voice that was a goblin's voice worn thin over Maelgur's cold one, the whole file of the hammer guard took a step back, every one, because they knew the face. Vargesh, Barrog said. His landslide voice had gone to gravel. That is Vargesh. He was lost. The lore says he was lost in the cold years. The smith Vargesh, 400 years gone, taken by the blight in the first. He stopped. He kept him. The sun thief kept him. 400 years. I am the message, the thing that had been Vargesh said, and the words were its own and the cold beneath them was not. My maker sends me to the one who stopped the river. He knows the child is here. He knows the child is yours. He bids me say, there is no wall in the deep stone that has not been laid in a name, and there is no name the child cannot open, and so there is no wall that will keep my maker out in the end when he chooses to come. He bids me say that he does not wish the child dead. He wishes the child brought, and he bids me say last that he will give the nation one mercy it never gave him, which is a choice. Send the child down to the lost forge of his own will, and the nation may live out its slow centuries in peace. Keep the child, and my maker will come and take him, and unname every soul in the deep stone on his way out, and there will be no nation left to mourn the taking. The nothing-colored eyes found Harry, small in the ward light behind the old warder. He bids me say to the child alone, we are the same, you and I, they will use you as I was used. Come and be used by no one, come and be unmade by the world no longer. Come and break, with me, everything that was ever built to cage us. The breach was silent but for the failing ward's thin scream. And Harry Potter, 7 years old, stepped out from behind Gornuk's shoulder, past the old warder's scarred hand that came up too late to stop him, and stood in the ward light before the cold remade thing and looked at it without flinching because he had decided somewhere in the last 3 months that he was done flinching at things made by the sun thief. No, he said. The thing that had been Vargesh tilted its head, Maelgur's curiosity moving the dead goblin's neck. He will ask why. Tell him I said no because he got one thing wrong, Harry said, and his clear child's voice did not shake. He thinks we're the same because we were both thrown away, and we were. I know what it is to be the thing nobody wants in the dark alone, and so does he, and that's real, and he's not lying about it. His green eyes were very steady. But here's the thing he can't understand, because it's the one thing he never had. When I was in the dark and nobody wanted me, somebody came. They heard me. They came back, they held the part of me the curse ate so I wouldn't lose it. They made me kin. He took a breath. Nobody ever came for him. That's the whole difference between us. Not power, not being thrown away. Somebody came for me and nobody came for him, and instead of finding someone, he decided to eat everyone, and that's not the same as me, that's the exact opposite of me, and the proof is that he's standing in a stolen body 400 years old asking a child to be alone with him forever, and I've got an old goblin behind me who'll burn his own hands to the bone before he lets that happen. He did not look back at Gornuk, he did not need to. Tell the sun thief I said no. Tell him I'm not the same as him. Tell him I had a forge and a friend and a name nobody could unsay, and he never did, and that's why he lost 400 years ago, and that's why he's going to lose again. He set his small hand on the hilt of the knife Remember at his hip, and tell him I'm coming for him, not because the nation tells me to. Because he made the thing that ate a morning out of me when I was 7, and I'm going to find his lost forge, and I'm going to do to his name exactly what I did to the blights, and there won't be enough of the sun thief left to send a message with. For a long moment the cold remade thing simply looked at him, Maelgur's mind behind the dead goblin's eyes weighing the child the way Ragnarok had once weighed him, and finding Harry saw it, felt it in the cold voice's shift, not contempt, but the first cold flicker of something the sun thief had not felt in 400 years, which was the recognition of a real enemy. He hears you, the thing that had been Vargesh said softly. He did not expect to be answered. He is, the cold voice paused, as though the mind behind it were genuinely surprised. He is pleased. He says a key that fights the hand is a better key than a key that comes willing, for it has an edge, and he has missed edges in 400 years among the willing dead. He says, come then, child, come and try to unsay me. He says he will be waiting at the root of the lost forge, in the hold the tallies have forgotten, and that he will not move against the nation until you come, because he would not for all the world deprive himself of the pleasure of being come for. The thing inclined its dead head, a horrible courtesy. He says, it has been 400 years since anything was worth waiting for. Thank you, child, for being worth the wait. And then the cold went out of the thing that had been Vargesh all at once, Melger's hand withdrawn from the glove, and the 400-year-old goblin smith, freed for one instant at the very end, looked at Barrog with his own eyes restored and his own voice cracking out of the ruin of him. "Captain, burn me, do not let him keep me." And Barrog, weeping, which Harry had not known Barrog could do, stepped forward and swung tooth and gave the smith Vargesh the mercy 400 years too late. The remade body fell and the breach went dark, and the failing ward, its violator gone, knit itself shut and began slowly to sing again. No one spoke for a long time in the deep gallery. Then Gornuk put his scarred hand on the back of Harry's neck gently and turned the boy to face him and looked at him with the black living eye and the white blind one and said, in a voice Harry had never heard him use, "You told the sun thief you are coming for him." "Yes," Harry said, "and you meant it." "Yes." The old warder was quiet a moment. Then he said, "Then you must be told the whole of it, tonight, all of it, every truth the stone seat has kept even from itself, because a friend who has sworn to walk into the lost forge must walk in knowing exactly what waits, and I will not send you blind into the dark the way the world has sent every other child it claimed to love." He straightened, and there was iron in the old bones again, the weariness burned off by something fiercer. "Come. We go to the stone seat. The nation goes to war tonight, Harry Potter, on the ground of its oldest enemy. For the sake of a wizard child it made kin 3 months ago, and the child has just told that enemy to his face that he is coming. So now we must make it true. Now we must make a plan worthy of the promise you have made, because you have made it, and a friend of the forge keeps what he decides." The ghost of the hard goblin smile, Barrog's smile, crossed the old warder's cracked face. "You decided beforehand, I heard you. Now we will all of us, the whole nation, do the thing you decided when the fear comes. Come, the war begins." Chapter 5 end. Chapter 6. The Curse's Maker. You did not plan a war against Melger the Pale the way you planned any other war, because Melger the Pale had already been planning his for 400 years. The stone seat understood this, and so the council that met beneath the mountain in the days after the breach did not begin with strategy. It began with the truth, all of it, laid bare at last by Scarnox the tally-keeper, who had kept the worst of it locked even from himself, and who now unlocked it because a child had sworn to walk into the dark and deserved to walk in seeing. "He cannot be killed," Scarnox said into the silence of the council cave, and let the words sit. "I will say the worst thing first, so that no one builds a plan on a hope. Melger the Pale cannot be killed, because Melger the Pale is already dead, and has been for 400 years, and that is the whole of his strength. He bound his own soul into the stolen forge the way he tried to make us bind it, struck himself into iron that forgets nothing, anchored to a false name carved at the root of his lost hold, exactly as he anchored the blight to a false name at the root of ours. He is a phylactery the size of a forge. Burn the body he wears, and he wears another. Break the forge, and he is not in the forge, he is in the name, and the name will simply build itself a new forge from the next stone it touches. He is the blight made large and made clever and made himself. There is no blade for him, there is no fire for him, there is no craft in all the deep stone that can end him, for craft is the thing he eats." "Then how," Barrog demanded, his great hands white on Tooth's haft, "you bring us a war we cannot win and call it the truth and stop. How?" "The same way the blight was ended," Scarnox said, and turned his blind face toward the small figure standing among the lords. "The same way, and by the same hand. He is anchored to a false name. He is a theft wearing a true name it never owned. And there is one creature in all the world who can stand before a false name and speak the halting truth to it until it stops, who can unsay the thing that no craft can break, and he is 7 years old, and he is ours, and he has already told the sun thief to his face that he is coming." The dry voice did not waver. "Harry breaks the blight, the war ends. There is no other road. There has never been any other road. The whole of the nation's war comes down to getting one child within reach of one carved name, and keeping him alive and unbroken long enough to speak." And Harry, who had been listening with the flat attention he brought to every system, said, "Then he knows that too." The council turned to him. "He's not stupid," Harry said. "He's the opposite of stupid. He's been thinking for 400 years with nothing to do but think. He knows the only thing that can end him is the same thing that ended the blight, somebody who can unsay a name, and there's only one of those." He looked around the ring of stone faces. "Me. He knows I'm the only weapon that works on him. So when he says, 'Come and try to unsay me,' he's not being brave, he's being clever. He wants me to come, and he wants me to get close enough to unsay him, because the only way I can unsay him is to reach into his name with the gift, and the moment I reach into his name, he reaches back into the gift, and then he's got his hand on the one thing in the world that can unmake goblin true names." His green eyes were very steady. "That's his whole plan. It's not to keep me out. So let me all the way in and grab the gift while it's reaching and turn it around and use me to unname the whole nation at the root, which is the thing he's wanted for 400 years and never had a tool for. I'm the tool. He didn't send Vargesh to threaten us. He sent Vargesh to invite us. He wants me to walk into his forge and put my hand on his name because that's the exact moment he wins." The cave was silent. "Then we do not send you," Gornuk said low. "If walking in is the trap, we do not walk in. Then he comes here, Harry said, and does it on his own ground instead of letting us pick the ground, and we've given up the one advantage we have, which is that he wants me to come to him, which means he'll wait, which means we get to choose the day and the door and the plan. He shook his head. We can't not go. He's right that there's no wall that keeps him out forever, because I made every wall openable the day I learned to unsay names, and he knows it, and a thing with 400 years of patience will always outweigh a nation. If we hide, we lose slowly. If we go, we lose fast and less. He paused, and the whole council leaned toward the 7-year-old as though he were the eldest among them. Unless we go knowing it's a trap and let him think we don't and build our own trap inside his, so that the exact moment he thinks he's won, the moment he reaches into the gift to turn it around, is the moment we've been planning for the whole time. You have a plan, Ragnarok said. It was not a question. The director's winter eyes had not left the boy. I have the start of one, Harry said. And I'm going to need all of you to make it real, because it only works if it looks, right up until the last second, exactly like him winning. Which means some of what we do is going to look like losing. It's going to look like losing so well that even our own soldiers have to believe it, or he'll smell it. He's been reading minds and souls for 400 years, and he'll know a bluff that anyone in the room knows is a bluff. He looked at Gornuk and at Barog and at Skarnox and last and longest at Ragnarok. So I'm going to tell the plan to exactly the people who have to know it to make it work, and no one else. And the rest of the nation is going to walk into that forge believing we might lose, because the only way to beat a thing that reads souls is to send it souls that aren't pretending. He set his jaw. It's a terrible plan. People are going to be frightened who don't have to be. People might die who'd live if everyone knew, but it's the only plan that beats him, because it's the only plan he can't read off our faces, and I've thought about it from every side and there isn't another one. He looked at Ragnarok. You said you wanted to see what the child is worth. This is what I'm worth. A plan that wins by looking like it's losing, told to 4 people, carried into the dark on the backs of soldiers who believe in it because we let them believe the worst. Tell me if the nation can bear it. If it can't, we find another way, and I'll keep looking till my eyes bleed, but I don't think there is one. The director of Gringotts looked at the boy for a long, cold weighing moment, and then he did the thing he had done only once before. On the night the curse broke, he stopped weighing. Tell the 4 of us, Ragnarok said, and the nation will bear what it must. It has borne 400 years of dying in silence. It can bear one night of fear in service of not dying at all. He rose from the high stone seat. Make your trap inside his trap, friend of the forge, and may the fire forgive us all if you're wrong. They told the soldiers a true thing that was not the whole thing, which Harry had learned from Skarnox was the oldest and most honest kind of lie. The expedition would descend to Carreg Dŵr, the sunken hold, the lost place the tallies had forgotten, where the sun thief kept his stolen forge. The Hammerguard would cut a road through whatever the dark had become. The friend of the forge would reach the root and do to Maelgur's name what he had done to the Blights. It was all true. What the soldiers were not told, what only Ragnarok, Gornuk, Barog, and Skarnox knew, was the shape of the trap inside the trap, the thing Harry meant to do at the exact moment the sun thief believed he had won. And because the soldiers were not told, they were afraid, truly afraid, the way Harry had said they must be, so that when Maelgur read the descending column he would read 40 goblins and 1 child walking into his jaws believing they might not walk out, which was the truth, and a thing that reads souls cannot find the lie hidden inside a truth it can taste. They went down on the dark of the new moon, when the deep stone was deepest. Carreg Dŵr lay below even the default down roads that had been sealed for 4 centuries, through galleries where the goblins' own old wards had gone silent and gray, and the deeper they went the more the stone itself began to sing the whole song, the eaten silence. The blight signature spread now through a mile of rock like frost through a window pane. Harry walked near the front between Gornuk and Barog with the knife remember at his hip and the torque warm at his throat, and he listened to the dark ahead and did not like what he heard. There are things down here, he said quietly, the 3rd hour. Lots of them, ahead and to the sides. They're not alive, they sing like the blight, like eaten things, but they're not still either. They're waiting. He's filled the road with them. He frowned, listening. They used to be goblins like Vargesh. He's been taking the dead from the old battlefields for 400 years and remaking them, and they're down here and they're his, and they're between us and the forge. Rust whites, Skarnox whispered from his litter at the column's heart. The lore names them and prays they are only lore. Goblin dead, the craft soul eaten out, and the sun thief's cold will poured in. They do not tire and they do not fear, and they cannot be truly killed, for they are already dead. The old smiths who fell in the cold years, the lost garrison of Carndŵr, 4,000 years of our honored dead, he has made an army of our grief. To fight them is to fight our own ancestors wearing the blight as a skin. Then we will fight our ancestors, said Barog grimly, and beg their forgiveness after, and give them the mercy we gave Vargesh, which is to break the skin and let what is left of them go. He hefted tooth. Form the tooth, friend at the center. We cut to the forge or we die in the cutting, and either way the sun thief learns what it costs to make an army of Hammerguard dead and point it at the Hammerguard living. They came in the 4th hour out of the dark and the fighting began. Harry had learned warcraft as a system, and now he learned the other thing war was, which the systems did not teach, which was that it was loud and fast, and that people you knew came apart in front of you and there was no time to stop. The Rustwites came in a flood, pale and silent and terrible, the bones of goblins moving with Maelger's cold patience, and the Hammerguard met them in the tooth, the shield wall Harry had once unzipped on a practice floor, locked now for real in a gallery a mile below the world. And the tooth held because it was made to hold, because 1,000 years of discipline does not fail when the dying starts, but the Whites did not tire and did not fear and did not stop, and a wall that holds forever still loses soldiers one at a time to the things that reach over it. Harry fought from the center, and he did not fight with the knife, though remember was in his hand. He fought the way Barrog had taught him, the way he had beaten Dernick, the way he had unzipped the tooth. He watched and he listened, and he found the thing the enemy had not measured. The Rustwites sang the Blight's whole song, and the Blight's song was a thing Harry knew better than any creature alive, and he found in the first minutes of the fighting that the cold will animating them was not in each White but between them, a single binding, Maelger's will threaded through the whole host like the Blight had been threaded through 1,000 blades, one mind in many bodies. And a thing that is one mind in many bodies has one place where the mind is thinnest, the old ones in the back. Harry shouted over the iron din to Barrog, the ones that aren't moving yet, the ones standing still at the edges, that's where he's anchoring the whole host, the still ones are the anchor points like the carvings around the curse, break those and the ones in front lose the thread and just fall. Don't fight the front's endless, send a hook to the flanks and break the still ones. Barrog did not question it. He had unzipped a tooth on a child's word. He split his file on a child's word now, and sent Dernick in a hooking party wide to the gallery's edge where the still Whites stood like grey statues feeding Maelger's will into the host. And when Dernick's axe took the first still White apart, a whole rank of the attacking Whites faltered, the thread cut, the cold will gone out of them and dropped to clattering bone, and Harry in the center felt the host's song stutter, and knew he had found the thing the Sun Thief had not measured. Which was that a child who had spent 3 months learning to hear the structure of a curse could hear the structure of an army made of the same stuff. The Whites learned, though, which Harry had not expected, and the learning nearly cost them the road. After the third anchor fell to Dernick's hooking parties, the host changed. Maelger, watching through 10,000 dead eyes, stopped, leaving his anchor Whites standing still and exposed at the flanks, and began to hide them in the press, moving, indistinguishable from the rest, so that Harry's trick of sending hooks to the still ones at the edges suddenly had nothing to aim at. The tooth, advancing on a plan that no longer worked, faltered. A whole rank of Whites it had counted on to drop stayed standing, and the line bowed inward, and for a long terrible moment the column was nearly enveloped. He moved the anchors, Barrog roared. Friend, they are in the press now, we cannot find them. Then we don't find them by looking, Harry shouted back, eyes shut, listening. The anchors did not look different anymore, but they did not sound different to the eye's deception. They sounded different to him, because an anchor carried more of Maelger's cold will than the Whites it fed, a thicker thread of the whole song, and a thing that carries more of a song is a thing that sings louder to the one who can hear. I can hear them, they're louder, the anchors are louder in the press, the will pulls in them. Barrog, follow my voice when I call a direction, hook there, don't ask why. And he began to call them, blind in the center of the bending tooth, picking the loud cold threads out of the press by ear alone, and Barrog's hooking parties cut where the child called, and the anchors fell one after another, though no eye could have told them from the host, and the bowed line straightened and advanced, and the Whites that had learned to hide had not learned, could not learn to hide from a thing that did not use its eyes at all. They cut their way forward, anchor by anchor, the tooth advancing over the bones of the fallen again dead, and they were winning, and it cost them. Dernick fell in the 7th hour. He fell well, which was the only mercy of it, fell taking the last still White in a chamber that had held 100 of them, fell so that the host in front of him lost its thread and dropped, and the road opened for the column behind. He fell with his axe in a rust-white skull and the White's cold hand in his chest, and Harry reached him a moment too late, and knelt over the young Hammerguard who had disarmed him 11 times on a practice floor and laughed, and Dernick looked up at the friend of the forge with the light going out of his eyes and said in Goblin, which Harry understood now, "Did I find the thing it had not measured, friend?" "You found it," Harry said. His voice did not shake because he had decided beforehand that it would not, because Dernick deserved to die hearing it true and not hearing a child cry. "You broke the anchor, the roads open because of you, the whole nation walks through because of you." "Good," said Dernick, and the light went out, and Barrog lifted the body himself and would let no other carry it, and the column went on down, toward the forge, with its first true death carried at its heart, and Harry walked beside the captain of the Hammerguard and let the one beat of it move through him and be true and pass, because there was a mile of dark still ahead, and the grief would have to wait for the living to have time for it. Between the battle and the forge there was a door, and the door was a trap, and it was the cleverest thing Maelger had built, and it very nearly took them without a single White. The gallery narrowed to a bridge of black stone over a gulf that had no bottom Harry's ear could find, and at the bridge's far end stood an arch carved with the pale face, and the air under the arch sang wrong in a way that was not the White Song or the Blight Song but something quieter and worse. First scout to step under it, a hammer guard named Othram, steady as old iron, walked 3 paces past the arch and then simply stopped and stood, and when Barog called him back he turned with a face gone slack and empty and said mildly, "Back where I was going somewhere, I have forgotten where, it does not seem to matter," and sat down on the bridge in the middle of the dark and began contentedly to forget the rest of himself. "Don't follow him," Harry said sharply, and the column froze. He stood at the bridge's mouth with his other sense flung wide, listening to the arch, and what he heard turned his stomach. "It's a ward. He built a ward into the arch. It doesn't hurt you, it doesn't stop you, it unmakes your intent. The blight ate the intent out of metal, this eats the intent out of people. You walk under it and it quietly takes away the reason you're walking, and then the reason you're anything, until you're just a thing that used to want things, sitting on a bridge." He watched Othram forget his own name with a serenity that was the most horrible thing in the vault. He knew the hammer guard would come. He knew they'd come with purpose, with discipline, with 1,000 years of intent, and he built a door that turns all of that into the exact thing that gets eaten first. The more you mean to cross it, the faster it takes you. Discipline walks straight into it. "Then how does anything cross?" Barog demanded. "We cannot cross a bridge without meaning to cross it." "You can't," Harry said, "but I can hear the grain of it." He was already moving, already reading the ward the way Gornock had taught him, grain and oath, the way the working wished to lie, the place where the maker had to leave a seam, because every ward has a seam, even a 400-year-old ward, even the Sun Thief's. It's anchored to a false name, same as everything he makes. He's only got the one trick. It's a brilliant trick, but it's only one, and the false name is carved in the keystone of the arch, and it's saying forget your purpose to anything that passes under, over and over, like the blight said, "I belong." He stopped at the arch beneath the pale carved face, and the forget song poured over him, and he felt his own reason for being there begin to soften at the edges. "Why am I here? I was going somewhere, it does not matter," and he did the thing he had decided beforehand on the descent when Scarnox had warned him the road would have traps. He did not fight the forgetting, because fighting it fed it the same as the blight. He listened to it, and he named it. "You're not a true working," Harry said to the keystone, to the carved name, his voice steady though his purpose was fraying. "You're a thief wearing a ward. You tell people to forget why they came, but you don't have a why of your own. You're just a hole that makes more holes. And I know exactly what you are, because I unsaid your big brother 3 months ago at the root of a better forge than this one." He set his hand on the keystone, and he did not reach in, he only named, the way he had named the blight. "I came here to unsay the thing that made you. That's my purpose. And you can't eat a purpose I've said out loud and true, because saying it true puts it somewhere you can't reach. I came to unsay the Sun Thief. Say it with me or get out of my way." The forget song stuttered. The false name in the keystone met not with disciplined intent it could eat, but with a truth spoken flat and plain, found no purchase, and the ward did not break, for Harry had no time to break it, but it bent, it parted, it let the named thing through, the way the brick wall behind the pub had once let through the boy who knew which brick was asking. Harry walked under the arch with his purpose intact and his hand on the stone, and behind him, freed for an instant from the forget song's pull as the ward bent around the friend, Othram blinked and remembered his name and his purpose and the bridge, and scrambled up white-faced to rejoin the column, and one by one the hammer guard crossed in Harry's wake in the parted seam of the ward, each of them holding to the friend's named purpose like a rope across the dark. Because their own would have been eaten and his would not. "He builds the same lock every time," Harry said quietly on the far side as the last soldier crossed. "The blight, the whites, this door, it's all one trick, a false name anchored saying itself, eating whatever fights it. He's the most patient mind in the world, and he's only got one idea, because 400 years alone with no one to answer you doesn't make you clever, it just makes you more sure." He looked toward the deep red glow ahead where the forge waited, and being sure is the thing he hasn't measured. Come on, the door was the last of his cleverness, the forge is just him. They rested once in a dead gallery between the bridge and the forge, because even a war column must breathe, and it was there in the cold dark that Gornock told Harry the last thing the boy needed to know. "When you make me your anchor," the old warder said low so the soldiers would not hear, "and you will, for the plan needs a warder to hold him in the open, and I am the warder you trust, you must not look at me while I hold him, whatever it costs me, whatever it sounds like." His ruin-to-be hands rested on his knees. "A warder holds, that is the whole of what a warder is, I have told you. But a warder who is being watched by the one he loves will hold for that one, will pour himself out faster to spare them the sight, and that is how warders die who need not. So you will not watch me. You will shut your eyes and find his name, and you will trust that I am doing my one thing, which is not letting go, and you will do your one thing, which is the naming, and we will not waste a single breath of each other's strength on looking. Do you understand? The looking is the luxury. We cannot afford the looking, we can only afford the work. I understand, Harry said. He did. He had understood it since the ninth night when Gornuk's hand had been flat against his back and he had not been able to see it and had not needed to. Eyes shut, find the name, trust the anchor, don't spend strength on looking. Good. The old warder was quiet a moment in the cold dark. I have one fear, Harry, and I will say it once and not again, because a thing said once in the dark before a battle is honest and a thing said twice is a burden. My fear is not dying. I am 300 years old, the dark is an old friend and I am not afraid of it. My fear is that I will not be enough, that I will take hold of him and he will be stronger than my grip, and let go before you have the name, and it will have been my hands that failed at the one moment everything turned on. He turned the black eye on the boy. If that happens, if I fail, you must not stop to grieve me. You must run and live and find another road, because a dead anchor is no use and a grieving friend is a captured one. Promise me, if my hands fail, you run. Harry looked at the old goblin a long moment in the cold. I promise I won't waste your holding, Harry said. That's the promise I'll keep. Not running, I'm not going to promise to run, because I'd be lying and you'd know, and a lie before a battle is worse than nothing. But I promise that if you take hold of him, I'll get the name before your hands fail, because I've decided to beforehand, and you've watched me keep what I decide. Your hands won't fail because I won't let the naming take long enough for them to. That's the only promise that's worth anything, so that's the one I'll make. He held the black eye. You be the anchor, I'll be fast. We've both done the impossible once already. We're getting good at it. And Gornuk, master warder of the deep stone, looked at the 7-year-old who had just refused to promise him a comfortable lie and promised him a hard truth instead, and made a sound that was almost a laugh in the cold dark and said, Yes, I believe we are. Come then, friend of the forge, the fire is close. Let us go and be impossible together one more time. The forge of Carragdur was the Heartforge's shadow, and standing at its root, Harry understood for the first time the full size of what the Sun Thief had done. It was the same shape as the great forge of his own nation, the cathedral vault, the anvil at the root, the carvings climbing the black stone, but where the Heartforge sang the choir of a living people, this forge sang the whole song, the eaten silence, 400 years of stolen soul burned down to keep one dead man undying. And carved at its root, vast and pale and worn, was a face Harry knew, the long narrow face with the high brow and the hollow cheeks, the same face that had been carved at the root of his own forge to anchor the blight, except that here it was not a carving at all. Here it moved. Melgar the Pale sat at the root of his stolen forge, in a body that was his own, 400 years preserved, pale as bone and thin as winter, and his eyes were the color of nothing, and they opened as the column came into the vault, and he smiled, and his smile was the most patient and the most terrible thing Harry had ever seen, because there was no malice in it at all, only a vast cold gladness. The gladness of a creature who has waited 400 years for something interesting to happen and watched it finally walk through the door. The child who says no, Melgar said. His voice was the cold voice from the black iron, unworn now by any glove, and it filled the vault like cold water filling a well. Do you know, I have been delighted these 3 weeks. 400 years among the willing dead, and then a small reaching hand reaches into my finest work and tells it the truth, and a small clear voice tells my messenger no and means it and promises to come. I had forgotten the taste of being answered. I had forgotten that there were creatures in the world who could surprise me. The nothing-colored eyes moved over the hammerguard, the body of Durnick at Barog's feet, the old warder at the child's side, and came to rest with terrible gentleness on Harry. Come closer, child, you have come all this way to unsay me. Come and try, I will not stop you. I have waited a long time to be tried. And Harry, who had planned for exactly this, who had built his trap inside the Sun Thief's trap and told it to only 4 souls, walked forward across the vault toward the root of the forge, and Gornuk walked at his side, and the hammerguard held the vault's mouth behind them, and the boy stopped before the living carving of the pale and looked up into the eyes that were the color of nothing. I know what you want, Harry said. You want me to reach into your name. Because the second I reach in, you reach into the gift, and you grab it, and you turn it around, and you use me to unname the whole nation at once and drink them all down. That's the trap. That's why you invited me. You don't want to keep me out. You want to let me all the way in. Melgar was quiet for a moment. Then the cold gladness in his face deepened, and he said softly, You know, and you came anyway. Oh, child, you are better than I hoped. Yes, that is the trap. I built it the moment I learned what you were, and I built it knowing you might see it, because a key that sees the lock and turns anyway is a key worth having, and I did so want you to be worth having. He leaned forward, pale hands on the pale carved knees. But knowing the trap is not the same as escaping it. You have one gift, and your gift is to reach into a name and unsay it, and there is no other way for you to end me but to reach. And the instant you reach, I have you. You cannot unsay me without reaching, and you cannot reach without being taken. You have walked into a room with one door, child, and I am the door. So, what will you do? Reach and be taken and serve me forever as the key that ends your kin, or turn and walk home and live out your little life knowing you left me here to come for them on a day of my choosing? The nothing eyes glittered. There is no third thing. I have had 400 years to be sure there is no third thing. I am, if nothing else, thorough. There's a third thing, Harry said. You just told me what it is. And he did the thing he had told four souls, the trap inside the trap, and it was the simplest thing in the world, and the Sun Thief never saw it, because the Sun Thief had spent 400 years being the cleverest mind in every dark, and had forgotten the one thing a creature forgets when it is never answered, which is that the other side gets to make a plan too. Harry did not reach into Melger's name. He had never, in any version of the plan, meant to reach into Melger's name. Reaching was the trap. Everyone had agreed reaching was the trap. The whole descent, the whole fear, the whole true terror carried on the soldiers' faces had been built to make Melger certain that the child would in the end have to reach, because reaching was the only way to unsay him, and the Sun Thief had built his entire 400-year patience on the certainty that the child had only one move. But Harry had broken the blight by understanding that the curse had two parts, not one, the revenge and the theft, twined together, and that no one had beaten it because no one had seen it was two things. And Melger was two things too. He was the name carved here at the root of this forge. And he was the reach, the cold will he threaded out into the world, into Vargesh, into the Rustwites, into the moving blight, into the army of the dead. He was here, anchored, undying. But to wield Harry, to turn the gift around, he would have to reach out of his own name, out of his anchor, into the child's gift, and the instant he did that, for the first time in 400 years, Melger the Pale would not be wholly inside his own anchor. He would be reaching, and a thing that is reaching has, for that instant, put part of itself outside the wall. "I'm not going to reach into you," Harry said to the Sun Thief, into the cold vault, with the whole nation's plan balanced on the next 10 seconds. "I'm going to stand here and do nothing. And you're going to have to reach into me to take the gift, because the gift won't come to you, it's mine. It only reaches when I reach it, and I'm not reaching. So if you want it, you have to come and get it. You have to reach out of your name, out of your anchor, all the way into me." His green eyes were very steady, and behind him, unnoticed, Gornuk's scarred hands had come up, and the old warder's lips had begun to move. And the second you do, the second the Sun Thief reaches out of his own anchor for the first time in 400 years, there's going to be a goblin warder right here whose whole life is one thing, which is to not let go, and he's going to grab the part of you that's reaching and hold it outside your wall, while I do the only thing I was ever going to do, which isn't unsay you from the inside. Melger's cold face changed at last, the gladness curdling toward the first true alarm it had felt in 4 centuries, and he understood, a half-second too late, that the child had not come to reach into his name. The child had come to make him reach out of it. "It's from the outside," Harry said. "I unsaid the blight from the inside because the blight couldn't reach back, but you can reach back, so I can't go in, so I made you come out. And a name that's reaching out of its anchor is a name that's standing in the open with nobody home behind it, and that's the only thing I ever needed, not to get into you, but to get you out of you into the open, where Gornuk can hold you and I can finally say what you actually are." He set his small hand not on the carved face but on the empty air between himself and the Sun Thief, where the cold reach hung exposed. "Reach then. You said there's no third thing. There is, it's this. Come and get it." And Melger the Pale, 400 years patient, who could not let the gift walk away and could not take it without reaching, who had built one trap and never imagined the child building another inside it, reached. The cold will came out of the carved name like a hand out of a sleeve, vast and old and certain, reaching across the vault for the child and the gift, and Gornuk, master warder of the deep stone, who had once held a failing ward shut with his bare hands for a night and a day and not let go, threw both scarred hands into the cold reach and seized it, and held it in the open outside the wall, screaming as 400 years of cold poured into his goblin iron soul, and did not let go. "Now, child," the old warder roared, burning, I have him in the open. Whatever you're going to do, do it now." And it was the worst moment, and it was the moment the whole plan had been built toward, and they had reached it exactly as planned, and the cost of it was that Gornuk was burning, the cold reach pouring 4 centuries of hunger into him. And Harry could feel the old goblin's true name beginning to fray at the edges under it, the spider morning's hole opening in the one soul Harry loved best in the world, and across the vault, Melger's pale face had gone rigid with the first real fear of his long death. Caught reaching, caught in the open, caught at last by the one move he had not made in 400 years because no one had ever made him. And the Sun Thief, desperate, did the thing a cornered 400-year-old mind does, and poured everything into the reach, all of it, the whole cold will, to break the old warder's grip before the child could speak. And Gornuk buckled, and the Rustwites at the vault's mouth surged forward against the hammer guard with their master's whole will behind them. And Barog bellowed and the tooth bent, and somewhere in the breaking Skarnoks cried out a warning Harry could not hear, and the old warder's voice came one last time through teeth clenched against 4 centuries of cold. "Harry, I cannot hold him long." Chapter 6 end. Chapter 7 Forged Ally. Harry had one move, and he had known from the beginning that he would have only seconds to make it, and so he had decided long before exactly what he would do when the fear came. The fear came now. Gornuk was burning. The old warder stood in the center of the vault with both scarred hands buried in the cold reach of the Sun Thief, holding 400 years of hunger outside its own wall, and Harry could hear the old goblin's true name fraying under it, the edges going gray, the spider morning's hole opening in the soul Harry loved best in the world. Behind them the tooth was bending, the rust-white surging with Maelger's hole will thrown against the line. Dernick was dead. The vault was a roar of cold and iron and the screaming of a warder who would not let go. And Harry, 7 years old, stood in the middle of it and did the thing he had decided, which was to ignore all of it, because the plan had never been to win the fight. The fight was the noise the trap made closing. The plan was the unsaying, and the unsaying did not happen in the noise. It happened in the one quiet place that no noise could reach, the place where Harry listened. So he did not look at Gornock burning. He did not look at the bending tooth. He shut his eyes in the heart of the roar and he listened, the way he had listened on the floor of the marble hall when he was a smaller boy with a smaller secret, and he found the thing he had come a mile under the world to find. Maelger's name. It hung in the open now, exposed, the cold reach pulled all the way out of its anchor and into Gornock's grip, and for the first time in 400 years the Sun Thief was not safe inside his carved wall. He was out, reaching, standing in the open with the whole of himself committed to the grab, and Harry put his listening on the name and heard it whole at last, the way he had heard the Blight's false name in the choir of true ones. And it was a theft. Of course it was a theft. It was the same trick, the only trick, the one idea 400 years of solitude had never improved. A false name worn over a hollow, a stolen true name that had never belonged to the thing that wore it, saying itself to keep a dead man undying. Harry heard the lie of it, the whole architecture of the lie, and he understood the last piece, the piece Scarnox had not known and Harry had only guessed, that the name Maelger wore was not even Maelger's own. It was a true name he had stolen 400 years ago from the first goblin he ever ate, the smith whose forge this had been, the lord of lost Carag-Dûr, whose soul Maelger had taken first and whose name he had worn ever since, hiding the hollow of himself inside a real name the way the Blight had hidden in the choir. The Sun Thief had no name of his own. He had thrown his own away, somewhere in 400 years of theft, and worn the dead smith's, and that was the hollow at the root of him, the false note, the thing that named would stop. "I know what you are," Harry said. He did not shout it. He said it quietly into the roar, the way you say a true thing, and the vault did not quiet, but the name heard him, the way the Blight had heard him, the way the Forget-Door had heard him, because a thing that is reaching for you is a thing that is paying attention to you, and Maelger was reaching with all of himself. "That's not your name," Harry said. "It belongs to the goblin you ate first, the smith of this hold, 400 years ago. You stole his name because you'd already thrown your own away, and you've been hiding inside his ever since, the same way the Blight hid inside the choir, because a hollow can't stand in the open, it has to wear a real name or it falls apart. And you've worn his so long you've forgotten you're wearing it, you think it's yours. You walked into the open just now sure you were Maelger the Pale, the Sun Thief, the Undying, and you're not. There's no Maelger anymore. He threw himself away centuries ago. There's just a hollow wearing a dead smith's name, and the smith's been dead 400 years, and his name was never yours, and I know it, and now you know I know it." The cold reach in Gornock's burning hands went rigid. "You're not undying," Harry said into the open name, with no craft and no reaching, only the flat, unanswerable truth laid bare. "You're 400 years late to death. You've been borrowing other people's names to dodge. The smith whose name you stole, I can give it back to him. It's his. It was always his, and the second it's his again, you've got nothing to stand in, nothing to wear, nothing to hide the hollow, and a hollow in the open with no name on it just falls. That's the third thing, Maelger. That's the move you didn't measure. I don't have to unmake you. I just have to give the smith back his name and you fall out of it, because it was never holding you up, you were hiding inside it, and I'm about to open the door." He drew the knife, remember, from his hip, the small, true blade he had forged, the blade whose whole name and oath was the one thing the Sun Thief had spent 400 years destroying, and he held it up in the cold light, and he spoke the smith's true name, heard it whole in the stolen reach, the real name under the theft, and gave it back out loud, to the dead goblin it had always belonged to. He named the smith of Carag-Dûr by his own true name restored. And the stolen name came off the Sun Thief like a glove pulled off a hand. It did not explode. None of it ever exploded. That was the thing Harry had learned at the root of his own forge and proved again here at the root of this one. It simply stopped. The false thing, named with nowhere left to stand, came apart the way a word comes apart when the speaker stops speaking it, the way a wheel stops when the thing that turned it is taken out. The hollow that had called itself Maelger the Pale hung for one instant in the open vault, nameless at last, 400 years of borrowed time all come due in a single breath, and then the cold reach in Gornock's hands had nothing behind it, no will, no name, no thief, only the spent dark of a death 4 centuries overdue, and the old warder's burning grip closed on emptiness, and the Sun Thief was gone. Not destroyed, undone, unsaid. Hollow, named for the hollow it was, fell out of the world it had been stealing its way through, and all the cold went out of the vault at once. And then, like a held breath let go after 400 years, the stolen soul came home. It rushed up out of the dead forge and through the vault and out along every road of the deep dark at once, 4 centuries of craft soul, all the intent the Sun Thief had eaten and held and burned to keep himself undying, released back into the nation it had been stolen from. Harry felt it pour past him, the great homecoming song, and he felt the rust whites at the vault's mouth shudder as the cold will that drove them was unset out from under them, and drop all at once 4,000 years of goblin dead finally and truly let go, the skin broken, the things inside released into whatever waited past the dark. The whole song died across a mile of stone. The eaten silence ended. And the lost forge of Carag-Dûr, which had burned on stolen soul for 400 years, guttered out into a clean dark for the first time since before the White House was built, because there was nothing left to keep it lit, and nothing left that wanted to. Harry caught Gornuk as the old warder fell. Gornuk lived. That was the first mercy, and Harry did not let go of it, kneeling on the cold stone of the dead forge with the old goblin's head in his lap and the whole spent vault going quiet around them. The warder's hands were ruined, burned past the old scars, the cold having poured through them the way the forge fire had poured through them 100 years before, and he would never again lay a true ward with those hands, and they both knew it before either said it, and his true name was marked. Harry could hear it, the edges where the sun thief's cold had frayed it, the gray places, the small absences, the price of holding 400 years of hunger outside its wall for the 90 seconds it had taken a child to name a hollow. Gornuk had not let go. He had said on a night in the deep galleries months before that a warder was the one who did not let go, and that there would be a night Harry needed him not to, and the night had come and he had not, and it had cost him pieces of himself he would not get back. "You held him," Harry said. His voice did not shake, because he had decided it would not, because Gornuk deserved to hear it true. "You held him in the open the whole time. I couldn't have reached the name if you hadn't pulled him out of his anchor and kept him there. The whole nation walks out of here because you didn't let go." "I am 300 years old," Gornuk said. His dry voice was a ruin, but the black living eye found the boy and held him. "I have buried sons. I told you the first hour that I was too old for sympathy, and I lied, and I have gone on lying to you about my heart since the day you stood on the floor of the hall and heard the thing no one else could hear." His ruined hand moved, and Harry took it, gently, careful of the burns. "I would have held him a year. I would have held him until there was nothing of me left to fray, because the thing I was holding him for was you, and you are the best thing I have made in 300 years, and I did not make you, I only heard you and was glad." The old warder's grip tightened what was left of it. "We made a small good thing together once, a ward on a door no one needed held, and I told you it would outlast us both. This is the other thing we made together, you and I, and it will outlast us too, a dead man unsaid, a nation given back its soul, a war ended at the root. Not a bad pair of works, friend of the forge, for an old warder and a boy from a cupboard." The black eye gleamed. "Now help me up. I will not be carried out of the enemy's forge like Dernick, the fire keep him. I walked in on my own feet, and I will walk out on them, even if you must be the thing I lean on, which, the ghost of something almost like a smile, I find, to my surprise, I do not mind." And Harry got the old goblin to his feet, and Gornuk leaned on the boy, and they walked out of the dead forge of Carag-Dûr together, the warder and the friend, at the head of a column that had walked in afraid and walked out victorious and carried its one true death between them all the way up into the singing dark. They honored Dernick in the heart forge, and they did it the goblin way, which was not with words but with work. Barog forged the blade himself, would let no other smith near it, and struck Dernick's true name into it. The name and the deed both. Here fell Dernick of the Hammerguard, who found the thing the enemy had not measured and opened the road with his body, and hung it on the wall of the fallen where the nation's honored dead were kept, so that 10,000 years from now a goblin with the listening gift could put a hand to the steel and hear exactly how Dernick died and exactly why it mattered. Harry stood at the captain's side through the forging, and when it was done Barog looked at the boy with his flat dark eyes that had once weighed Harry as a risk to be subtracted, and said gruffly, "He asked you at the end whether he had found the thing it had not measured. I heard him." "He found it," Harry said. "He broke the anchor. I told him true." "I know you did." Barog hung the blade and stood back and was quiet a moment. "I argued for your death, wizard child, in the council the first night. I said burn him and be done. He is a wizard. He will betray us. I want you to know that I remember saying it and that I was wrong, and that a Hammerguard who is wrong says so to the one he wronged, because we do not carry debts." He turned to face Harry fully and struck his fist once against his chest, the salute the goblins gave only to their own. "I was wrong about you. You fought like a siege, and you bled with my soldiers, and you carried Gornuk out on your own small shoulders, and there is no creature in the deep stone, born of the fire or made friend to it, whom I would rather have at my flank when the next war comes. And there will be a next war. There is always a next war. When it comes, I will want you there. That is the whole of my apology, and it is the largest one I have ever made." The hard goblin smile. "Do not make me make another for 100 years at least." "I'll try," said Harry, and meant it, and they clasped hands goblin fashion, palm to wrist, the captain and the friend, and that was the end of Barog's distrust, struck and tempered and put away for good. Ragnarok found a reason to walk the boy out alone again, the way he had on the night of the rite, and again it was not sentiment, and again the reason became clear only in the tunnel dark away from the others. You built a trap inside his trap, the director said, and you told it to 4 souls, and you sent 40 soldiers into the dark believing they might die so that the one mind in the world that reads souls would read only the truth. It worked. It worked exactly as you said it would. And I find I must ask you a thing, and you must answer it the way you answer everything, which is plainly because the answer matters to the nation and not only to me. He stopped and turned his winter eyes on the boy. Where did a child of 7 learn to win by looking as though he were losing? That is not a thing the gift teaches. That is not a thing the lore teaches. That is a thing a creature learns in only one school, and I would know which school made you before I trust the whole nation to the mind it made. Harry was quiet a moment in the dark. The cupboard, he said. You learn it in the cupboard. He met the director's eyes without flinching, because he had stopped flinching at the truth of his own life some time ago. When you're small and the people who have all the power can do anything they want to you, you learn fast that you can't win by being strong because you're not, and you can't win by being right because they don't care. The only thing you've got is that they've stopped looking at you. They think you're nothing, so they say everything in front of you and do everything in front of you and never once think the nothing in the corner is counting. So you count, you watch. You learn exactly how they're strong and exactly which way they've turned their backs, and you wait, and you let them go on thinking you're nothing, because the thinking you're nothing is the only weapon you have, and you don't spend it until it wins the whole thing at once. He shrugged, a small motion in the dark. Melgar spent 400 years being the cleverest thing in every room and never once being answered, and that makes you sure, and sure is a kind of blindness. I spent 7 years being the nothing in the corner that everybody was sure about. He never learned what it's like to be underestimated because nobody was ever bigger than him. I never learned anything else, so when it came down to one of us not seeing the other clearly, it was never going to be me. He looked up. That's the school that made me. It's not one you'd wish on anyone. But it made the thing that beat him, so I've decided to be glad of it, the way Gornuk decided to be glad of the gift. It costs me to be glad of the cupboard, but it's mine and it won and I'll keep it. Ragnarok looked at the boy for a long, cold, weighing moment, and then, for the second time since Harry had known him, the creature who priced everything gave him something that had no price on it at all. I've held the stone seat for 90 years, the director said, and I have made the nation richer and safer and more feared than it was when I took it, by being the coldest mind in every bargain, and I have never once been glad of the thing that made me cold, which was a war when I was young that I will not speak of. You have made me reconsider the matter. He turned to go and spoke the rest over his shoulder into the dark the way he had before. We did not make you friend a night too soon. We made you brother a year too late. I should have moved for it the night the curse broke, and I did not because I was weighing, and the weighing nearly cost us Gornuk and did cost us Durnick. I will weigh less in future where you are concerned. That is the largest thing a creature like me can offer, and I offer it. Go up into your sun, Forge brother, keep your silence, grow strong. And when the sunlit world's war finds you, as it will, send down word, and the nation will come, because we do not weigh any more whether to come for you. He paused at the turn of the tunnel. We simply come, see that you are worth it. I have decided that you are. Do not make me wrong twice in one lifetime. I have not the years to spare. And he was gone into the dark, and Harry stood alone in the tunnel with the torque warm at his throat, and understood that he had just been given the thing the cold director had never given any creature in 90 years, which was not warmth and not trust exactly, but something rarer and more durable than either. A decision made once by a mind that did not change its decisions. Griffook caught him at the cart, ambitious and grinning, with a folded paper in his clever hands. The vault of standing, the young goblin said, holding it out. The one you began building before you were 8, of things they cannot take. It has grown, Forge brother. Word travels in the deep stone, and the deep stone has decided it would like to do business with the creature who saved it. And so there are arrangements now, accounts and identities, and a name in the ledgers that the sunlit world will never find, and gold, real gold, more of it than a boy in a cupboard would know what to do with, set aside against the day you are grown enough to spend it. His grin widened. I told you the first season that you frightened me a little, and that you would frighten a great many people in time, and that I was glad to be on your side of it. I am gladder now. I have hitched my small, ambitious wagon to the rising thing, and the rising thing is a 7-year-old human who unsaid a dead god, and I expect to go very far indeed. He pressed the paper into Harry's hands. Do not thank me. Goblins do not thank, and you are half goblin now by the fire's own reckoning. Use it, grow. And when you are a man and the wizard's world is yours to walk in as you please, remember the young teller who carried your messages when you were small, and find him something interesting to do, because I warn you now, Forge brother, I intend to be wasted on the front counter no longer. I'll remember, Harry said, and pocketed the paper and clasped the young goblin's hand, palm to wrist, the way you sealed a thing you meant to keep. You ran out between the council sessions to tell me what they were deciding when it was my life on the table and nobody else would. I don't forget who pulled when nobody was pulling. You're on the list, Griffook. It's a short list. You'll go far on it. And Griffook, who had hoped for a favor and been given a place instead, looked at the boy with something that was almost awe and almost greed and entirely loyal. and bowed, goblin fashion, lower than a teller bows to anyone, and Harry got into the cart and went up toward the sun with a vault of standing at his back and a friend on a short list, and the certain knowledge that he was building, line by line, the thing that would make him impossible to cage. The wizarding world never learned any of it, and the not learning was its own quiet war, fought and won above their heads while they looked at the sky. Hesper Quill came closest, because Hesper Quill was the kind that came closest. She pressed her audit of Gringotts a third time, with a stronger seal and a sharper argument, and the goblins met her in a marble room with the treaty open on the table between them, and an old goblin lawyer named Scarnox, for the tally-keeper kept the law above as well as below, recited to her, with perfect courtesy and contempt cold enough to frost the windows, the 400-year-old clause that ended her audit before it began. She left the marble room knowing with absolute certainty that something vast had happened beneath it, and knowing equally that she would never, by any road the ministry could walk, be permitted to learn what. The not knowing lodged in her like a splinter and stayed there for the rest of her ambitious life, and she built her career on lesser things, and never understood that she had stood twice within 100 feet of the largest secret in Britain, and been turned away each time by a courtesy she could not break and a child she had forgotten she'd seen. Dumbledore came at it once more too, the spring after, when his silver instrument drew its ordered loops and its trained lattices, and at last one night drew something that made the old wizard set down his spoon a second time. A single clean figure he almost recognized, the signature of a working so old and so deep that for one moment Albus Dumbledore, who knew more of magic than nearly any living wizard, felt the floor of his knowledge shift beneath him, and thought with a chill. That is not a child's magic, that is not any magic I have a name for, that is something out of the deep places of the world, and it is touching the boy. He sat with it a long time as the spring light went down the tower windows. And then he reasoned as he always reasoned from what he knew, which was the sky, and the sky that spring was loud with the things he believed mattered, the gathering shape of the war he was certain was coming, the Dark Lord he was certain was not gone, the destiny he had written for the boy and meant to spring upon him in good time. He reasoned that the instrument was failing, perhaps, or that the Potter inheritance ran stranger and deeper than he had known, and he resolved again to ensure the boy's welcome at Hogwarts was warm. He looked up as he always looked up, and the alliance that had ended a 400-year war went on existing beneath his feet, unwatched, unsuspected, and entirely his to discover, on any day he chose to look down, which he never did. Curious, the old wizard said again to the empty office, and turned his eyes back to the sky. He would meet the boy in 3 years on a train and find him strange and self-possessed and harder to read than any first year had a right to be, and would put it down to the cupboard and the cruelty and the fame, and would be wrong as he had been wrong about the instruments, because there was a whole life folded into the quiet boy that Albus Dumbledore had never once thought to look for, a mile beneath his feet, in the deep stone, in the fire that forgot nothing and remembered above all and forever. The name of the child who had given it back its soul. Harry went back up into the sun on his own terms, which were not the terms he had been living by, and the difference was the whole of what had changed. Privet Drive was exactly as he had left it. The cupboard was the same size. Vernon read the paper through him. Petunia's mouth went thin at his quiet. Dudley's voice whined through the ceiling. None of it had changed at all, and that was the thing Harry understood, standing in the small hall the evening he came home from the deep stone for the last time that year. None of it had changed, and none of it mattered, because the boy it had been built to make small was gone, and in his place stood a creature it had no power over at all. He was not powerless. He would never be powerless again. He had a name in the deep stone the Dursleys could not reach, and a vault of standing the ministry could not touch, and a torque at his throat that meant, if he ever gripped it and wanted them, an entire nation would put aside its 10,000-year caution and move mountains to come. He had a knife he had forged with his own hands, named Remember, that grew truer as he grew truer. He had a captain who wanted him at his flank, and a tally-keeper who taught him the lore of 2 worlds, and a director who had stopped pricing him and started, in the cold goblin way, to trust him. And he had an old warder with ruined hands and a frayed name who had held 400 years of cold outside its wall for 90 seconds because the thing he was holding it for was a boy from a cupboard, and who was, Harry knew now, the nearest thing to a father he was ever likely to have, and enough. The Dursleys could not make a creature like that small. They could only fail to see him as they had always failed to see him, and their failure to see was no longer a wound, it was weather. He turned the bacon and did his sums and waited for the dark, and was, for the first time in his life, entirely unafraid of the people he lived among, because he had measured them the way Barog had taught him to measure everything, and found that they were strong in a direction that no longer pointed at him. He was 7 years old. Hogwarts was 4 years off, and the destiny written for him in the sky was 4 years and a lifetime away, and he would meet it when it came, not as the powerless orphan it had been written for, but as something the writers had never accounted for, the way the sun thief had never accounted for him. A friend of the forge, armed and backed and self-possessed, who had broken a curse no smith could break and unsaid a dead man no blade could kill, and who had learned, before he was 8, the one lesson that would make him impossible to cage, that the world's idea of what he was had never once been the truth, and that the truth was his to forge. Scarnox did the last work of the war, and it was the work the tally keeper had been kept alive 300 years to do, though he had never known it until now. He forged the history, not in words. The goblins did not trust words, which faded and bent and were argued over by the living until the dead could not recognize their own deeds. He forged it into iron the way the nation forged everything that must be remembered, a long plate of black metal struck at the Heartforge's root, into which the blind old keeper hammered the whole of it, the true names and the true deeds, so that 10,000 years from now a goblin with the listening gift could lay a hand on the plate and hear, whole and unfadable, exactly what had happened in the 400th year of the Blight. He struck the sun thief into it, the thief who came and could not steal the fire and so cursed it, struck the 4 centuries of slow forgetting, struck the cold years and the failed smiths and the proud curse breakers who made the rot stronger by fighting it well. And then he struck the child. He struck a boy of 7 who walked in off the street and heard the thing no one would hear, struck the breaking of the unbreakable, struck the right and the descent, and Durnik who opened the road with his body, and Gornuk who held 400 years of cold outside its wall and did not let go. He struck the unnaming and the homecoming of the stolen soul, and the dead forge gone clean and dark at last. He left nothing out and he softened nothing, because the fire forgot nothing now and deserved a history as honest as itself. This is the thing I feared I would never strike, the old tally keeper said when it was done, his blind face turned toward the boy who stood watching the iron cool. For 300 years I kept the tally of a dying nation, and I believed the last thing I would ever forge was the count of how much we had forgotten in the century I died in. Instead I have forged this. He laid his gray hand flat on the warm black plate. A nation saved, a curse broken, a dead man unsaid, and a child of the sun made brother to the fire, who will be remembered in the deep stone for as long as there is a deep stone, which is to say forever, which is to say longer than the wizard's world will remember anything at all. The dry rustle of his laugh. They will write you into their sky, Harry, in time, a destiny, a prophecy, a boy who lived. And it will fade the way all their writing fades, argued over and bent and half forgotten in a few short centuries. But you are written here now in iron that forgets nothing, in the truest history 2 peoples ever shared. Let the wizards have their sky. You are in the stone is forever, and the stone will always know exactly who you were, which is more than the sky will ever give anyone. And Harry put his hand beside the old keeper's on the warm black plate, and felt the whole of his own deed singing up out of the iron, true and unfadable in his, and let the one beat of it move through him and pass, and understood that he had been given the one thing the sunlit world, for all its fame and all its prophecies, had never once offered him. Not to be remembered as a story which fades, but to be remembered as a fact struck into iron forever, exactly as he was. They gave him the last of it in the Heartforge before the whole nation, on the night the war was formally declared ended. It had never been done before. The nation gathered, all of it that could be gathered, the hung city packed along its inverted streets and bridges, 10,000 goblins and more come to look upon the thing that had happened to them, the friend of the forge standing on the black platform at the root of the great fire where it had all begun. Ragnok stood beside the boy, and Scarnox and Barog and Gornuk, leaning on a black iron cane he needed now, his ruined hands wrapped in clean cloth, the black living eye bright. And Ragnok, director of Gringotts, holder of the stone seat, who priced everything and had stopped pricing this, spoke to the nation, and his quiet voice carried to every corner of the singing city. 400 years ago, he said, a thief came into our fire and could not steal it, and so he cursed it and went away into the dark to feed on us slowly, and we did not even know his name. For 400 years we forgot a little more of ourselves each century and called it the way of the world and kept the dying secret even from our own children, because a people that cannot save itself would rather not be pitied. He let that sit in the silence of 10,000. And then a child of the sun, 7 years old, unwanted by his own kind, walked in off the street and heard the thing we had spent 4 centuries refusing to hear. He broke the curse no smith could break. He walked into the enemy's own forge and unsaid the dead man no blade could kill. He gave us back 400 years of our stolen soul, and he carried our eldest warder out of the dark on his own shoulders, and he asked us for nothing, because he had learned in his cupboard not to ask. The winter eyes turned to the boy. We made him friend of the forge before we knew what he was worth, on a hope and a debt and an old warder's stubbornness. We know now what he is worth the nation. And so tonight, before all of you, the stone seat does the thing it has not done in 900 years for any creature, born of the fire or made friend to it. It names him not only friend but forge brother, kin in full, with a seat in the deep council when he is grown to claim it, and the whole arm of the nation at his back in the sun. Not as a friend we protect, but as a brother we stand beside whatever he stands against, for as long as the fire remembers, which is forever. And the nation struck its fists against its chests, 10,000 at once, a single enormous iron sound that went through the whole hung city and through every blade and ring and lock and ward, and through the torque at Harry's throat, and through the knife at his hip, and through the new singing stone of a forge that forgot nothing and remembered, above all, him. Harry stood on the black platform in the roar of it, the boy who had lived 7 years in a cupboard, unwanted, unclaimed, unseen, and let the one beat of it move through him and be true. He did not cry. He had decided beforehand not to, because he wanted to see it clearly, all of it, the 10,000 faces and the singing city and the old warder leaning on his cane with the bright black eye, so that he would have it, whole and clear in his, on every night for the rest of his life when he most needed to remember that he had, somewhere in the world, a place that was his. He had asked them once why he should take a kinship that would tear him when he could walk back into the sun and be only what the sunlit world wished him to be. He had told them the truth, that nobody up there was pulling. Somebody was pulling now. An entire nation struck into its iron, pulling him toward the only home he had ever had. And 4 years up the road, when the sunlit world finally remembered the boy it had written a destiny for and came at last to collect him, it would find to its very great surprise that the boy had a home of his own already, and a name no one could unsay, and a forge at his back, and that he would meet whatever they had written for him on his own terms, in his own time, as his own forged self. And not one moment before he chose, the fire roared, the city sang, and Harry Potter, friend of the forge brother, kin in full to the fire that forgot nothing, smiled and put his hand over the warm torque at his throat, and was, for the first time in his life, exactly where he belonged. Chapter 7 End.